All right, so you drive to court. Did you have any preconceptions in mind of what you were going to do or what you needed to hear on either side?
I was thinking emotionally because I knew it was going to be playing on my emotions, and I was thinking mercy.
Really?
Yeah.
Were you hoping that there'd be some like remorse shown or something like that?
Yes. Yeah, I don't think that day helped them.
Welcome to Creepalachia. Today is a huge day in the Natalie Cochran trial. So there's an interview happening today that possibly may not happen again. We're not sure, but we have a juror that was on the trial in the studio. And we also have Josie Moore.
Hello.
Again, thank you for joining us because I tend to get off track. Josie comes in with the facts and then asks the great questions. And also, I want to introduce our juror.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Doing good. And shout out to Nora. Lucky the Llama is actually our portrayal of this juror. We're going for some anonymity today. She didn't mind using her voice, but we are going to keep her likeness and name off of this. So if you think you know, just leave it alone. Leave these jurors alone. They had a long 3 weeks-ish.
Yep.
And this person contacted me and wanted to lay it all out there and then be done with it so we can try to turn our phones off, enjoy a little sunshine. So thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and get into it. Josie, I think I wanted to start with you receive a letter.
Yeah, I go to my mailbox, pull it out, see exactly what it is, and think, great. So filled out the information online, didn't think much about it. On New Year's, I got a text that I needed to report on January 13th to Courtroom 1.
Did you ever, I know it says, if you have certain circumstances, you can get out of it. Did you ever think about potentially applying for one of those or trying to?
No, because I really didn't have a good excuse to get out of it. So, no, I didn't. Just
You thought, I'll go and I'll talk about some parking violations.
Right. They'll never pick me.
Right. Well, and I mean, out of the large pool of people, how will it be me?
Right. Now, does the letter say particularly what it's for, or is it just like you've been selected? Now, I've gotten these letters before. Just
that I'd been selected for this term, of jury duty. So it goes through May, and I'm still in that jury pool. We were told that we would not be selected again if we were in this trial. Thank goodness. Yeah, I think I've served my civic duty for a lifetime.
Oh, yeah. I think you're done.
Yeah, I think you're good.
I think it's time to hang it up.
Right. So I just had to fill out that paperwork and it said report January 13th. So I think that's the start of this term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I showed up on that Monday morning.
Well, and on Monday morning, did you still not know what was going on?
When I walked in, you had to sign in and it said West Virginia versus Natalie Cochran on something. And I knew.
It's like, okay.
Yeah.
And obviously, living in this area, being a smaller, it's a bigger area for West Virginia, but still a rural community. Everyone knows everyone. Yeah. So instantly you're like, okay.
I knew the name.
Yeah.
So I went and sat down.
Yeah. So
couldn't believe it.
So how many were there that first day?
They said they called 80, but I'm thinking 56 or 58 showed up that day. But some people could have emailed in or called in and said, I have this obligation, and they were knocked out of that. So I can't remember exactly, 56, 58, something like that.
Mm-hmm. What's the selection process like? Who's asking questions, or people just saying,
Well, they started out and they filled the jury and the alternates, and then they started asking questions. So they already had, a selection of people they were starting with. And they just went through lists of witnesses and people who worked for the attorneys in both offices. And we had to raise our hand if we knew any of those people. And they recorded everybody who raised their hand. They would write it down that, they knew this person or, things like that. So what they use that information for is once we were back in the jury, like in the jury box, and we had to go back for personal interviews, they used that information that they collected during that hand raising stage to ask us questions.
What questions did you raise your hand to? Do you remember?
They were I raised my hand a couple times just of some witnesses that I knew, but not very well.
Yeah.
Right. And to clarify for people, like, you knew the name, but that was really it. You
Right.
didn't really-
Right. Or someone I had contact with years and years ago. Just, I didn't want to not raise my hand because I haven't talked to this person in a long time, but, better safe than sorry. Raise your hand. I know this person.
Sure. And some groundwork here, like, what did you know personally about this case going into that jury selection room?
Well, I knew about the Ponzi scheme, and they asked me that personally in my interview. So I knew about that stuff, but, just what I'd seen on the news or newspapers. And I knew about it, but that was how long ago, like it just, I didn't know details.
I think that's most of us too, is we remember this random thing occurring, but we didn't really know much about it
Right.
until all this.
Mm-hmm.
So how many did they end up removing? I guess if there's 50 some, they cut.
From the first day, they removed, almost everyone but the main people. How long until so obviously they are interviewing you guys privately. How long were you waiting until you got to go back and figure out if
it was the end of the first day. I was in seat 9, and they would work their way down and then eliminate people and refill those seats. So I was next in line at the end of day 1, and they came out and dismissed us. And I was like, whew, because kind of nerve-wracking thing to go back and be, interviewed with all of these people staring at you. But then I had to think about it the whole night. So I knew the next, first thing next morning, I was going to be, pulled in to the principal's office. That's how it felt.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the full cast of characters were there?
All the attorneys, the defendant, the judge, everybody sitting around a table.
It's a very small room too. There's no
windows.
It was
the jury room. It was very small, tight quarters. I sat next to the judge.
Oh, nice.
So, and he's great. He made it comfortable, because it's a nerve-wracking experience, but he made it, made it light and made a couple jokes during, just to make me comfortable. It was better than I was anticipating.
Yeah. Well, and Judge Kirk, we'll get into him. I'm curious of the menu that was offered every day. What kind? What kind?
Well, hey, I ate the biscuits, I ate the donuts, and I can tell now. I can tell you that.
We were all jealous, to be sure.
Yeah.
No, I've cut back.
That's great. So, okay. Did they finalize that one day, or was it the next day, or how many days did it take to find a jury?
He made it 2 days. The judge was 2 days.
Right. So that second day, I wasn't first to be interviewed, but because they had refilled a couple seats ahead of me. But then after my interview, you're literally sitting in a silent room the entire day. Other than my interview, I just sat in a chair the entire day. And that's tough. I don't do good with silence. So that was tough. But it was I didn't get home till 7:00 that second night for jury selection.
Wow. How much okay, question for later. I'm curious how much you get paid every day, because it's not, a super lot.
No,
but
$40 a day.
$40 a day.
Plus mileage.
So
you get so much per mileage. I'm not sure what it was, but
it's 56 cents per mile, I think is kind of standard what it is. All right. Well, that's good to know. So not much, y'all.
Yeah.
And y'all are sacrificing your time, and the whole trial ended up being 2 weeks out of your life. But thankful that you all did it. Appreciate it.
Thank
but
you.
Also, okay, so it's solidified. How many alternates do they pick? Do you know?
So They had 20 in the juror box and 9 alternates. So they narrowed it down and interviewed all of these people. And then once they solidified that, the defense got to knock 3 out of the jury box, and then the prosecution got to knock 3 out of the jury box. Same with the alternates. That's how we ended up with 12 jurors and 3 alternates.
Got it. Okay. And then the first day is what? Just opening statements, essentially?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you arrive that first day. Did Judge Kirk bring biscuits instantly that morning or donuts? Or did he kind of warm up to y'all?
We had donuts.
Donuts?
Yeah, Donut Connection. They were good donuts.
He promised that, like, after he, like, you guys were selected, he was like, I will bring.
Yep. Yeah, he made a promise and he delivered.
Super awesome, dude.
What was that first day like? Well, first of all, what was it like when you found out you were selected? Like, what was that overall feeling knowing that?
Well, I didn't really even realize it till I got to my car. They had a stand when they called our names if we were in the jury. And then it was really fast. They dismissed the others, walked us back to our jury room, handed us key cards to get into the secure hallway, and said, see you tomorrow. So I got out to my car and I was just like, wow, 3 weeks, I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the first day and the opening statements happen. What are you thinking? Why are you able to listen to what you're hearing, or are you still is it surreal kind of?
Yeah. I've been interested in the process, and here I was participating, and so I was curious about that. Honestly, I thought they both came out and did, pretty good in the beginning, and I was very open-minded, and it's like, they tell you one thing and then they tell you something else, and you don't know any of the facts at this point. So it's just like it's going to be a wild ride here.
Yeah.
It's kind of what I was thinking.
And that's what you told me off camera. Is like I was just totally facts driven and looking at what what we knew to be true,
right?
To ultimately decide. So opening statements happen, and then we have our first witness, which is Robert Heinzman, which was pretty long.
Oh, yeah, he was long.
Yeah, I mean, that was most of the day. Is there anything that points out to you specifically about his first testimony?
No, just trying to take it all in and, just figure out the facts there. But it was just really hard to sit there. That was our first day, and you're sitting in silence. And then during a break, you go back into the jury room and you can't talk about anything. So then you sit there in silence. So it's exhausting, so it was just a lot to take in that first day, but nothing specific, about his, but this was 3 weeks and it feels like 3 months, but nothing really.
Oh, in 3 weeks of having to just live with yourself,
right?
Like you can't watch anything, what was that like?
Well, it was hard to go to sleep at night. That's when I, would lay down and think about the day, and just really hard to fall asleep because you're just stuck in your own head thinking about things and thinking, oh, I want to bring that up, or, I hope I remember to talk about that, or I wonder what they're thinking. And it's just a lot.
And you can't deliberate till the deliberation period.
Not until, he gave us permission and gave us the directions there, at the end, and sent us on our way. So
did you have to avoid your phone or social media?
We had our phones. We had to leave the phones in the jury room during court, but during our breaks, and we were allowed to have our phones.
When do y'all select a 4-person?
That wasn't done until they gave us directions and sent us in for deliberation.
Oh, okay, so that's at the end.
We hadn't talked anything about it, and which is kind of good because we got to know these people a little bit over the time and figure out who you want in that position. In the mornings when we would get there, we would be chatty and talk about things, and then during lunch we would, but in between it was quiet because that was what was in our head. So we didn't want to talk about it. So we were quiet, but you still got to know each other, during those talks in the morning and at lunch. So had time for us to learn about one another and see who we think would be best for that.
Did you kind of build friendships a little bit?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can't say a bad word about any of the jurors. We got along really well. There was a few that didn't talk at all until deliberation. And then they talked, they participated, which was interesting. We were anxious to hear them speak. But, everyone participated and was, it was just, I can't say enough good things about them.
Oh, that's good. So
they
you
did
collaborated
such a good job. And, both attorneys, both sides picked this jury. They did a great job.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of how it works. Like they'll strike some and then the prosecutor goes and the defense goes and they kind of eventually end up at this dream team kind of.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No, where you're sitting, you're kind of like off to the side. So I think you guys stare directly at the witnesses when they're on the stand. Could you see much of the like defense table though? Because they're obviously on the other side over on a podium. So could you see much of them at all?
Not really. I mean, everybody else got a way better view than we did.
That's interesting.
What was it like seeing 12 cameras around the...
I had no idea there were 12 cameras around there.
Well,
so
I don't know the exact number, but there seemed to be a lot of them.
At least like 6, yeah.
6, that sounds right.
I saw some, but I really didn't pay much attention to it.
Yeah, didn't make you nervous?
No.
So they kind of were able to...
No, because I knew I was not on camera, so it wasn't an issue.
Sure. Well, that's cool. All right, so going through day one, we have Jennifer Davis come up after Robert Heinzman. And, if you hear any key points, Josie, we want to bring up, we're curious about, feel free to. But this testimony was mentioning of bringing the insulin over to Natalie's house in the goodie bag.
Right.
Like after that testimony, like how did this first day affect you personally?
Well, I mean, that really bothers me. It's a child's medicine. Your best friend, that's a big task to, give a friend to give you something like that. I don't know. It was
sure.
That really bothered me.
Yeah. And I mentioned too on here, like I get, so I went a long time. I'm a type 1 diabetic for people who don't know, but I was without insurance for a certain time period and I kind of crowdfunded insulin. And I had people bring it over. And if they didn't, I would have been in super bad shape. So I get that aspect of it. Obviously, I'm sure that, Jennifer lives with regrets here. I'm sure it's very hard.
She was a friend. She was being a good friend. I mean,
yeah.
And I mean, it was such an important thing of hers in her life to give to her. I mean, that shows what a friend she was, giving something that's precious to them to a friend, Oh, yeah. Yeah. And and they trusted her with, advice for their child. Right.
Because
scary.
Yeah. Natalie being a diabetes educator and everything. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's hard for them.
I had a little background in diabetes. I have a friend with a child with diabetes. So I wasn't going in blind, to it. So I did have background knowledge.
Oh.
And that helped frame my mind a little bit too.
That's good. Yeah, because I think for diabetics, it was pretty well like, yeah, that's what happened. I mean, insulin shock was what happened. But people who may not have the knowledge, which there was a lot of that being thrown around. I think I even heard the defense say that Humalog doesn't kill a body. We know this. And I'm like, what are we doing?
That was in the opening statements, I think.
Yeah,
and I thought, and I'm sitting there thinking, really? But that's their tactic the whole time.
Sure.
So, but yeah, that's what they're hoping for, really.
Yeah. Well, and like we mentioned, it had to be unanimous or, result in a potential hung jury, which would have been, what is it, Josie, a mistrial? And then
something
it's
like,
and it's done.
It's uncertain.
They have to decide whether to charge again or how to,
how to retry it.
Gotcha.
Retry the case. Yeah.
I'm not sure if you need different evidence. I don't know. But anyway, I'm
wondering, like, obviously you hear a lot of the witnesses testifying. A lot of it's just their own statements. But with Jennifer, for the first time, we see text messages, and this is, you don't know it then, but it's the only time you hear from Natalie is in these texts. So what was that like for you, getting to like see these text messages? Could you actually read them on the screen?
Yes. I mean, it was hard to read them.
Yeah.
Sometimes we were really squinting. You could, see us all leaning forward, but
we got to upgrade the courthouse, y'all. Because
for sure.
Yeah.
Money costs a lot of money, though.
I know, but
taxpayer dollars.
Or even like a screen close to the jury.
Because
like
I think the judge had a screen.
Right.
Yeah. But
right.
we could do something digital.
Right.
I mean, that projector was straight out of middle school.
I don't think they have
from the
trials
90s.
like this very often. So
I had to take pictures and then like zoom in with my phone to be able to read them. So I'm just wondering, like,
but text evidence was huge in this case. I mean, I can't even tell you the amount of text evidence, that we were given.
Well, I know Josie mentioned seeing a binder of just Stephanie Hamilton's
Huge
text.
binder.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. So, you all the evidence submitted into court was not spoke about, and you all had access of that. We won't skip to the deliberation phase yet, but I think it's important to let people know what you all had access to that everyone else didn't hear.
It was a drop in the bucket. You guys saw just a glimpse of what we saw.
What kind of effect did that have on the ultimate decision?
Big. I mean, it's right in front of your face. How do you, it's, you know what I mean? It's hard to pass that by. It's just, it was all there.
Sure. And we'll talk specific text messages that you all read that's like, that would have been big for the prosecution to show. It's just they really had to target their focus.
Yeah.
I mean, they kind of was like, let's pick this little chunk out of this mountain.
Right.
This kind of.
Right. And this little chunk, there was a lot of them, but they just had to pick and choose, what they could use.
Right.
Did they tell you? Because obviously, like, sometimes the attorneys after the jury had left, and like, oh, I forgot to admit this into evidence. I forgot to admit this. So did they tell you, like, anything admitted into evidence you can ask for? Was it given to you guys?
We heard the directions that were like, what? I don't know, 20 minutes.
Oh gosh, like 18 pages.
And I mean, I listened to it, but I don't know if I heard every single word that was said. But no, I mean, they sent us back and they closed the door and that's it. Like the bailiff would come into the jury room to get us or, count, see who's there and things like that. But, no, they closed the door and it was on us. But if we had a question during deliberation, we could write it down and, then that would be addressed.
So it's like a soundproof room. You can't really hear anything.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay, so we get through day one. Jennifer's heartfelt testimony. You go home, and you're like, I'm gonna DoorDash some tacos, or it's like, what do you do?
It's just, I mean, I was thinking how many days of this, because it was long. You're sitting there in silence pretty much all day long. I mean, we had a lunch break, and but it's just hard.
Yeah.
Did you do anything to cope, or like, I know for me, I would go home and like watch reruns of Gilmore Girls. That was like my coping mechanism.
I just dove into just my everyday life.
You have a medical marijuana card or anything?
Yeah, definitely not.
Okay. Nothing like that?
No, I just went and did my everyday chores and tasks that I had to do.
Try to like block it out in a way.
Yeah, I'm a reader, so.
It's like, I need a vacuum.
Yeah.
Let me.
Yeah, no, I didn't vacuum.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not one of those.
Gotcha. Let me shoot my bow and arrow. Or, but okay. So day one kind of wraps up. Hard to sleep. You come back in. Judge Biscuits has
donuts.
Nice.
So it was like donuts a few days in a row, and we were all kind of like, donuts.
Yeah.
Don't want to be that guy and complain about the donuts. And then that was when the sausage biscuit was brought up.
Did you guys discuss it amongst yourself? Like, okay, who's going to tell the judge that we'd like something else?
No.
Or it just kind of came up?
I think maybe he overheard.
Okay.
I don't know, but was it sauce? I think it was Chick-fil-A biscuit.
He mentioned he was going and he could pick up 12 or 13.
They were all gone.
Yeah.
So that was a winner.
Right. The irony of donuts every morning on an insulin murder trial.
That's true. Oh, I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like, I need some of that evidence to
I think that might have been why some people didn't eat the donuts in the morning.
Well, I couldn't eat them, obviously, because my pancreas, clocked out.
Right.
But I would
after
say
a
around
while,
2
we
o'clock, you're like,
also-
oh my God, I'm so tired.
That crack.
After a while, we also suggested donut holes because then you don't have to commit to a whole donut. But
Interesting.
yeah,
That makes sense.
we were a fan of the donut holes.
So it's like a variety box.
Yes,
Okay. Variety. So you got
Munchkins.
sprinkles.
right.
Mhm.
You got cream filled. Okay. I mean, I would be sitting there like, I'm gonna see if the same person picks the same donut, and then I'll kind of figure out what their personality is like. But y'all can talk about like fishing. And,
Oh yeah, we got to know one another.
Mhm.
hmm
that's
Did you
cool.
run
The
through all,
ones
like,
that talked, I'm a talker. Not everybody is, and that's okay. So some people, didn't talk that much, and that's okay. But some of us, I did the talking for.
And you kind of
some.
mentioned like, I think I have some lifelong friends that.
Oh, absolutely. I'm still keeping in contact with some. We've talked since, and about we feel at peace, and the more time passes, and the more things we see, we feel good about things. So.
Yeah. Well, and after it's over, y'all are actually able to come out in the real world again. So I would
Right.
imagine this having national coverage, it was pretty overwhelming.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I needed to go to the grocery store really bad on that last day. And I said, I'm not going to the grocery store.
Yeah.
At what point did you guys, because obviously after so many days, you run through all like the basic get to know you stuff or like talk about the weather. So at what point did you guys get to like more of the like serious get to know you questions? Just because you had nothing else to talk about.
Yeah. Like, someone's like, well, yeah, I've been divorced and I'm
Well, and I don't know details about all of their lives.
Right.
But I mean, there were times when it would be quiet. There's nothing to talk about. And I know I had listened to a podcast about a plane crash. And so I was like, I just listened to this in the car, and started conversation. I just don't like the silence.
Mhm.
So, just things like that. And things that were in the news. There was the plane crash that happened in the
Oh God. Yeah.
so we talked about that morning, things like that, the weather, because it was awful and freezing.
Yes.
That's a good point because publicly there's a lot of stuff going on nationally.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
actually a crazy time.
Right. Drones, we talked
Mhm.
about that stuff. Just,
Yeah. Was there any diabetics on the
there were.
jury?
There were.
My guess was there was 1.2 at least. There was a really good chance.
There were, and there were people, who had family members or friends. So, we weren't blind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Diabetes is like the new, I don't know. That's my second cousin, or like just
Right.
having so many cousins in West Virginia. Everyone knows a diabetic, it seems, or their pancreas don't work themselves. So I figured, I was like, there's got to be 1.2. There's 1.2 on there.
And surprisingly, that was not asked in my interview.
Really? If you
No.
knew anyone,
Really?
Nothing about insulin was asked.
you'd think they'd want to know if you had like personal knowledge about how, insulin
You would
works, how it
think.
affects someone with diabetes or
Yeah.
in general.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
afterwards, so we can't talk about that, but I knew there was a diabetic on the jury,
Mhm.
and I'm sitting there thinking, did they ask? And so during deliberation, I said, did they ask you? And they said no.
gotcha.
Wow.
Did they ask, like, are there medical professionals or anything like that?
I don't remember about that, but I know that someone went back for an interview. Their spouse was a lawyer, and they were dismissed. So that could have happened. We weren't really talking much during that phase.
Got it.
So that could have happened. I'm not sure.
So it was solo interviews?
Yes.
Okay.
One on
I missed that.
one on
sorry.
14.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, they start with a group. And that's technically public. So I got to listen into those public questions. Obviously, I didn't know who any of you guys were. You just see a bunch of people like raising their hands. And then after, like, to narrow it down, they do private interviews. I think it's more for like the privacy of the juries because they're going to ask, it could be very like,
Personal.
personal questions. And so that's done in private, which is allowed.
Got it.
So,
Mhm.
and I'm sure too, it's more comfortable for you guys to not have to answer those questions. To a
Well,
room full
yeah.
of
One of
people.
the questions was, is there a criminal in your family? Or,
Mhm. Yeah.
who wants to say that out loud?
Shout out.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a few. Come on.
Was it weird too? Like being in the room like with Natalie?
Yes.
Because you're like, it's a small table from what I can.
They're all looking at you, you know, and
writing notes.
Right. And he said, well, tell me, what do you know about her? It was Victor. About everyone was nice, but Victor was Victor. And he said, you're like, what do you know about my client? Or, and I said, I knew she was found guilty of a crime. And he said, the Ponzi scheme. I said, yes. And that was all about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And,
but I felt like I was being interrogated.
Sure. Yeah. That's, let's talk about that. Let's talk strategies here. So anyone that's been listening to the show, they probably know that I was a little critical on the prosecution, not super critical, but early on, it concerned me that they weren't really objecting at all. And then the defense kind of had the alternative tactic of objecting as much almost as they possibly can, and particular ones involving saying this has nothing to do with the financial crime, but in all, you know, while the state's saying the financial crime is the motive. So I was just curious how that played off to a Raleigh County jury.
You know, you can do the financial crime and not do the murder. You can be a murderer and not do the financial crime, but these were connected, period. I mean, there was no way around it. There was no way. Every time they objected and said that, I mean, it is connected.
Yeah. It's literally, or go ahead, Josie.
I was going to say, like, was it weird for you? Because I remember listening to Victor's opening and like, first of all, he kept calling Natalie like a bad girl. Which I thought was really.
Yeah. That's uncomfortable.
Was there some lost in translation type things that were going on kind of, or?
Well, I mean, it's hard to understand someone who does not have the same accent that you have. So he was hard to understand, period. And then, yeah.
But then I remember too, he called her a bad girl.
Yeah.
And then he tried to like play off her crime as like, oh, like, yes, she's bad, but she's not a murderer. Like,
right.
I'm wondering how, like, because then it was weird for him to object later to, like, you know, connecting the crimes when he initially said, oh, yeah, she did it. She's bad. That, like, it was a weird kind
Honestly, like, when we were deliberating, one of the jurors said their tactic was just to confuse us. Like, throw this, just keep throwing things at them, confuse them, and also do the same with the witnesses. Let me ask the same question 15 times until they give me an answer that I'm okay with.
Yeah. And anyone with ears would be like, okay, well, their strategy is basically, let's throw shade on everyone, including the murder victim, and not provide a theory of what actually happened.
You know, we all felt a certain way about, you know, the attorneys, but that didn't play a part in our decision. We were like, we can feel one way about them and look about the crime, you know, look at the facts and decide this. So,
That's great to know. Keep going. I'm sorry.
I don't know. I mean, it did play a part, but it didn't change, you know.
Sure.
Did you like feel the weight of the responsibility like throughout the trial? Obviously, like, you know, the judge is telling you how important your job is. He's like showing you appreciation. How did that feel? I didn't
realize, you know, the weight of it until deliberation day, you know, because that night, you know, I'm thinking tomorrow's the day. You know, we've been waiting to talk for all this time. Tomorrow's the day. So that's when it really, you know, got heavy. And that morning, before we went out that morning, the alternates were still with us and we held hands around the table and one of the jurors said a really powerful prayer. And I was emotional. There was a few of us emotional. We knew exactly the weight of the job that we were given. And it was heavy.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
It was heavy.
Was the person who, well, I mean, that's kind of a personal question. I mean, if they prayed, I'm just curious if they was a preacher or what, but don't worry about answering that. But
the person had a strong presence in the jury.
Right. That's great. So, okay, we go into day 2. We got it's donuts again, nice variety pack. donut holes were eventually decided on. Do you remember what day that was?
I can't keep track.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
we had food every day.
That's
Gotcha.
Kirkpatrick is the best.
Oh, he's the best.
And I'm pretty sure that came out of his pocket.
Oh yeah, he's very, very generous, and I think he wanted you guys to feel appreciated knowing what you were doing. And it seemed like, I mean, obviously, like sometimes you give people like the courtesy laugh, but you could kind of feel like that he was trying to show appreciation. And
You know, it was a hard job.
Mhm.
Everybody says, how was it? Did you like it? Well, how do you say you like something like that? So
Right.
no, it was tough, but every single person we interacted with was incredible. The bailiff was amazing. The clerks, the security guards. I mean, they made it the best possible experience that it could have been.
That's a good point too. While we're on that, the court process, actually, a lot of people aren't familiar with, but I'd like to talk about, Southern West Virginia and West Virginia get bad reps sometimes. We hear in the news this and that, whatever, but the professional environment that was created, but also friendly environment. Speak on, something someone may not realize about the system, and especially in Raleigh County, on how good these people are at their jobs.
Honestly, I was so proud. We hear, West Virginia gets hated on all the time. And, you see this kind of process lay out on television and, you think you know how it goes. And then you get in the process, and I was just so impressed. And I hope that, I know everybody didn't see the background that, we were seeing, everybody, the bailiff, all he was doing for us. And, but I hope that it was shown in court, especially with Judge Kirkpatrick, that, that was a special place.
Yeah. Well, everyone fell in love with him instantly.
yeah, it's sad that he's retiring after all this. Yeah.
What a great way to
That's true.
finish his career.
know, right?
I'm
It's like-
happy for him. I hope he really gets to enjoy himself.
It's like Roy Rogers, happy trails to you riding off into the sunset type stuff. I'm pretty sure this has not happened ever in a trial, but I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Yeah. Usually the judges, they're usually not too involved. Not that he got overly involved, but I think just the way that people were able to see him kind of, he added that like human aspect to it because, obviously the attorneys are doing their separate jobs, but he added that little bit of like, just, I don't know.
The only interaction we had with him, you guys saw.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So, we did not see him outside of the courtroom, minus the interview that we were in. And like I said, he made that interview comfortable.
That's good.
Do you all get your own exit? Like, do you have your own door you go out of or anything?
No, there's a safe hallway that we access through it with a key. But other than that, go through the same door, ride the same elevator with everybody else. And
Oh, hang on. We got Victor popping up. All right. So we are in officially day 2, and I'm going to kind of skim through some things. We start off the day with a pretty long testimony from Stephanie Hamilton.
That's when the book of text messages get
The
introduced.
binder. If anyone noticed, Josie pointed out to me that there's a binder of text messages, and we're going to, as we go, be sure to like Creepalachia, subscribe to the channel, because we're going to have a lot of interviews that are going to dive into several aspects of this that we did not hear in court. But is there anything specifically that pointed out to you that was concerning?
well, she suggested he needed to go to the hospital. That she was a medical professional. I think her opinion at that point was a pretty important one at the time.
Yeah.
Do you remember seeing the photo of Michael? Because that
Yes.
got brought up several times.
Constantly.
What was that like for you guys, not being able to react or discuss that, but seeing it over and over again?
I got to a point where I was numb, which is awful, and we also, that picture was, throughout the evidence. So we saw it over and over, as we're going through the evidence too. That's tough. I can't imagine taking a picture like that. So, that's what I was thinking about. Like, I just can't imagine taking that picture. I can't imagine sending that picture.
Yep. Someone you love falls, hits the floor. Your first move.
Panic, drop on the floor and call 911.
Okay. That's
immediately. And we discussed that.
Yep.
The jury discussed that. So.
Yeah. And the preponderance of all of this, to me, there's a little more than circumstantial evidence that came up, which is in the glucose readings. But the mountain of this evidence painting a picture, which we'll get into Ashley Akerd later. I'm curious what y'all thought about her clothes. But there's one thing I missed from Jennifer's testimony, and that was when the text messages were sent to her about Natalie stating that the steroids are really running my sugar up.
Right. That was that morning, the morning that Michael falls and goes unconscious. It was that morning. Yeah.
Yeah. The mention of insulin in those text messages. I'm going to need to be on insulin shots.
That was with Jennifer Davis, correct?
Yes. That was the first day.
I thought we were talking about Stephanie.
Yeah, we were.
Okay.
I kind of bounced back because I remember that text message, and I think that's important we talk about.
But then Stephanie Hamilton were asking for a steroid shot.
Right. Like 2 days before.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did that, what was your thoughts when because I think with Stephanie, she was very adamant about which drug she wanted.
Mm-hmm.
With Jennifer,
she did not want the pills.
Right. With Jennifer, it was, you tell your friend you're sick and I could use this drug. And then what was that like seeing her kind of try to acquire drugs over the course of a couple days?
I feel like she knew each person she was talking to and how she could get what she wanted.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't have to ask Jennifer Davis. She knew Jennifer Davis was a wonderful friend, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, then with Stephanie, she had to ask for the specific thing she wanted. You know what I mean?
Yeah, she's like Charlotte Manson. Like, she's like, okay, I'm gonna, use my crystal ball to get what I need.
She obviously knows how to work people, and she, did what she had to do.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. And, on that, I mean, several people feel this wasn't really brought up in court, but that, not only this, but this may be, not the first time this has been attempted, but I don't know.
Yeah.
The mention of him having previous seizures and things like that was very odd, which
it came from somewhere.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And you got to look at all this stuff because it's all, once you visualize exactly the conversations and the physical evidence that we have of mentioning of these drugs, it's pretty,
I think Ashley's timeline, she kind of said it all.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
40 minutes of, all right, here's what happened. I mean, the only thing better would have been to have it all on security camera.
Right.
Like just what, you know what I mean?
Right. There's no doorbell cam.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which also surprises me. I mean,
There was no.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So wouldn't you think? I mean, 2019, it wasn't that long ago.
I just got a Ring camera this year.
Yeah.
So,
But you're not a millionaire. You know what I mean?
I wish.
Well, they had a lot of expensive things.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Well, yeah, with other people's money,
I would think.
you can do that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
With
But yeah, you're right. I mean, yeah. So I'm looking at it a completely different way. But you're mentioning they want to protect their stuff.
right.
So yeah.
That kind of just surprised me. So.
That makes sense. So, all right, Stephanie gets up, provides a lot of crucial text evidence, a lot that they didn't show.
Yeah.
Pretty much Stephanie has every text for the past, I don't know, look
Right.
like 10 years, 20 years
Right.
since cell phones were created.
It was obvious they were very good friends.
Mm-hmm.
So they text daily.
Sure. And there was mentioning of, let's talk about some we didn't see. Did you see any that mentioned anything about cancer or chemotherapy or anything specific?
Yeah, definitely. Telling people she had cancer. We split up the evidence at one point. So I wasn't specifically reading hers. So I don't remember that exactly, but it was mentioned. I specifically remember her talking about she could stay at home and be with her child if she would, invest in these contracts. So I specifically remember that. And
Oh, she told Stephanie that.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because Stephanie, her child was ill they thought was going to be a serious illness.
So you're saying invest in this so you can have a return to quit your job and be with your sick kid?
Yes.
Oh my God.
That was brought up, and when Natalie was sentenced, Stephanie was there, had a victim statement, and she mentioned that was kind of how she got worked into the Ponzi scheme. Was her son was he was either going to have like procedures or something, there was going to be a big financial expense that they were going to have to do due to medical reasons. And Natalie was like, well, if you invest, you will have the money to take care of your son, and you could potentially be home with your son. So, but she did that several times. She played on all the victims' heartstrings to kind of get them to invest.
Every mom with a sick child wants to stay home with that child.
Yeah.
Period.
And not have that burden weighing on them of, you're not going to, most people, if your child needs something, you're not going to deny them, especially if it's medical. You're like, well, we'll figure it out.
Right.
And her way of figuring it out was...
It's preying on vulnerable people.
It was.
It gets me. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I wish we had... I think because it was so related to the Ponzi scheme, we didn't see that. And they wanted everyone to specifically see the meds that Natalie was requesting from Stephanie right before Michael goes into a coma. So I think that's maybe why they didn't bring them up. But obviously...
Well, and plus the objections flying, they wanted to get out a paragraph of sentences. So it's like, well, how do I do that?
Yeah.
I got to navigate this objection minefield. And on that too, I wanted to ask, strategy wise, did they start to separate themselves pretty early on their tactics, or did you kind of, how did that affect you all and your recognizing of the facts in the case? Was the objections kind of like, my goodness, can we
towards the end, how many days were we, doing that, and it's objecting? You can't help but roll your eyes.
Yeah.
It's just, we knew, who both of them are at this point. Let's just get by with it.
How did objecting to Donna having the photos up during her mercy statement affect you?
I get it. I get why the judge, did what he did. But come on now. Well, honestly, we weren't shown a picture of Michael until we were in deliberation. His driver's license.
Really?
Yeah.
That's the only picture you saw?
Yes.
Wow.
Well, there was pictures in there, but the driver's license was the first time that we had seen Michael's face.
Wow.
What was that, General? What was that like to kind of, after you see him on the floor many, many times?
It personalizes it. It's you're not just hearing about this case. It puts a face to it.
Well, y'all saw another awful moment while we're talking about pictures. His decomposed body on day 7 or 8.
Yeah, I don't understand. I don't think it was necessary.
Well, she brought it up, and then you can't help but hear Donna.
Oh yeah.
What were you thinking?
You could have heard Donna, in Pennsylvania. You could hear it was awful.
Did you have an idea of who she was at that point?
Yeah, we didn't know, but you're sitting up there looking at these people. I can't help but look out and see, who's out there. So you kind of, in your mind, figure out who you think people are. And I thought some people, were parents, and, they weren't. But at that point, it was pretty obvious, who she was.
And it's, you mentioned being facts-based. You got to kind of wipe that from your mind too. But obviously that's hard to hear.
Right.
And
you just imagine your loved ones and when, in that situation, and it is tough.
Yeah. Regardless.
Yeah.
You feel
anytime you see someone upset, that's upsetting,
It's a human response.
Sure. So, all right. Day 2, we get through Stephanie.
Oh no, you have to ask her. The banker. I'm dying to know what you thought about. Who was
I liked him.
Very sarcastic with Victor. Could obviously tell that he was getting upset with Victor's.
Well, he was the first person to give Victor a taste of his own medicine, you know? So I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I would be a terrible lawyer. I take everything so personally, and I'm like, because I just hear him saying, this is ridiculous. This is, this is horrendous. Why are we even talking to this person? And I'm just like, man, that stuff matters. Respect matters.
But all the witnesses were so obviously serious because they're in the courtroom. And for him to just kind of.
Well, and I listened to your podcast afterwards. This weekend, I did a binge fest and listened to that.
Thank you.
I heard you guys talking about it, and I don't know, I lost my train of thought.
No, that's fine.
Victor
calling of Mr. Universe and all of these random things.
Come on now, he wasn't Mr. Universe. No one painted him in that picture except for Victor.
Yeah. Well, and then that was part of it too, is they're saying he's a bodybuilder and all these Mexican supplements. And after, and Natalie sent a random text message while her husband was laying unconscious that said he took those stupid Mexican supplements again.
Chris. Yeah.
I felt like, to me, there was just this Teletubbies running across this field, sprinkling alibis across the land.
Back to the court guy. That's what we were talking about.
Oh, yeah, the banker.
Sorry, I lost train of
There's
thought.
so much.
You guys had talked about that, and you said he was kind of more relaxed than you would be in the courtroom, and I agree with that. But also something that sticks out about him is in the evidence, and I think it was pulled up, she sent an email February 6th, which is today, by the way.
That's...
Oh, no, it is. Oh, man. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Wow.
That feels awful.
She sent an email on February 6th to court at like 3:30 saying that she was still sick. We'll have to reschedule. There was no mention of Michael being sick. And at that point, he's been passed out on the couch for hours. I think that would probably be included in my message. So that's something that's stuck out about court.
Wow. Yeah.
And there's 100 of those things.
Because we didn't see any of the messages from court because he was on the screen and there's no way to pull up his messages and view court. So we didn't, you guys would have been the only ones to really be able to see all of that.
And I'm sure people are aware who's been following this case, but February 6th, 2019 was the day that Michael was poisoned with insulin and murdered. So thoughts to the family. My goodness, I don't know how I didn't even realize that. Wow, I got chills. So banker gives him some of the business. That kind of ends up, the point of the prosecution bringing this up, Josie, was to prove.
Well, they wanted to do a timeline. They wanted to, I think it went to motive, right? Why on the day that, Michael has his last conscious moment, that morning they're supposed to go to the bank. So I think they tried to paint it as like, if Michael goes to the bank on that day, he will learn about everything. He'll find out that they don't have an account with Bank of America. He'll find out that all the millions of dollars she said were getting transferred are not transferred. So that was very crucial to say that Natalie specifically canceled the appointment with the banker that day. And then it kind of leads to all the other events, right? So like it proves that, Michael could have found out about what was happening and she directly prevented it.
Right. And she was cashing fake checks, correct? Yeah. So needless to say, and then the defense will get up and be like, isn't it true you're just upset that she cost you so much time? He's like, well, yeah, obviously, when someone wastes your time, it sucks.
Right.
I mean, no, I'm glad to be here.
Right.
You know what I mean? It was pretty obvious. And then we go into the afternoon after the banker, which was the pilot. So he basically mentioned that the cancellation of the flight that morning.
Did you guys see the text messages from him, or did you
I don't remember. If they were just short. Yes, I think it was like, okay.
Right.
His response was like, okay.
I think it was just to
that
prove
again
that Natalie reached out, she was the one to cancel.
I felt bad for him. He was nervous because he really had nothing to do with this. He was just showing up to say, yeah, they canceled this flight. He didn't know these people.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, look at it that way. Like, well, if flight's canceled, I got to show up in a murder trial
Right.
I
6
know, right?
years later.
Why did I have to be the on-call pilot for
You
this
know?
one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
No, poor guy.
so it was just to prove like the weird happenings
Mhm.
of that day that were occurring and the not mentioning.
It's setting up that timeline.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, and then Chris Davis.
Then Chris Davis, which was super impactful, spoke about his best friend.
Mhm.
Did this kind of stick with you in any type of way?
Huge. I mean, you could clearly see how he felt about the situation. He was very passionate about it, and I feel like he's the reason Michael was got to the hospital.
Mhm.
Man, I really felt for him.
Yeah. And while watching him, well, a lot of Michael's friends, you could see regret and the truth at the same time. To me, it was like these people stood up and they said, Chris, to me, I spoke with him on the phone, and he seems to me just like a dude who lets the truth guide his path. And he
Right.
doesn't really necessarily care
Well, I don't think
what gets in the way.
they realized the extent of the problems, throughout the day. She's
Mhm.
texting saying Michael's sleeping it off. I don't think, he realized the seriousness of it until he got there.
Yeah.
Did you know that Chris was an attorney? Did they mention that at all beforehand?
Did they?
Well,
I'm trying to remember. Obviously,
the
I,
defense
I remember them saying he worked for Access Health. Didn't they say something like that?
yeah, they did. He was their counsel.
Yeah,
So I'm just
which he is
wondering-
now, I think.
I
Yeah.
remember that, but I don't specifically remember.
So I'm just wondering if that played into the weight at all. If you knew he was an attorney.
Oh, no.
It just was his overall.
No, I will say during my interview during my jury selection,
Mhm.
they asked me if I would believe a police officer's testimony over someone else or
Interesting.
and I said, no. But that was so kind of along the
I gotcha.
lines of that.
Right.
Like, would you believe an attorney over?
Sure.
So no.
And we're talking about an attorney who has brought hundreds of millions of dollars to West Virginia with the opioid settlement. He represented 4 counties, I think, in that.
And I had no clue of that.
Sure.
At this point.
Yeah, I think a lot of people didn't, because I felt the need to post this because Chris Davis isn't going to be friends with a knucklehead.
Correct.
That's
Which,
honestly-
you know what I mean? And that's kind of, I mean, he just isn't.
Mhm.
And that's kind of the shade I felt
Mhm.
they were throwing towards Michael throughout the entire thing. And they kind of did with him too, because I don't know if people realize, but it was brought up that Natalie brought an ethics complaint
Yeah,
against Chris Davis. And he had to go, in front of the bar, and they had to, which is a pain because you did nothing wrong, but still you're getting investigated, and it was quickly dropped. But which that was brought up in the mercy phase. They weren't really allowing him to address it. The defense wasn't, but the
Mhm.
prosecution made a point to let him
Right.
address
Wow.
that.
He got his answer out there before they shut him up.
He did. That was interesting. He was like, "You want to know what happened? I'll tell you anyways."
Yeah, I like that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. There eventually people who spent a lot of hours in the chair started like, well, I'm getting used to this, and I'm
Mhm.
gonna,
Right.
you know what I mean? Yeah, they get up there and you could tell like they're kind of fragile a little
Yeah.
bit, and then over time, most of them started to
Mhm.
kind of loosen up a little
I
bit, which
think-
is natural. I mean,
With Chris too, he's questioned a lot by Matthew about the Mexican steroids.
Mhm.
Do you remember what was your thought? Because obviously it keeps getting brought up, but there's no real explanation. Or
I just thought that he truly seemed like his best friend,
Mhm.
and that he would know about this. That was my thought.
oh yeah. Well, typically, I don't know this personally, but a lot of wrestling documentaries, things like that, when people are actively on steroids, they shoot each other up with them. You know what I mean?
Well,
But even
wouldn't-
still, I think steroids got a negative light. I just want to say that because, and though I haven't done them personally, there are tons of gym rats that you have no clue
Mm.
that are near you every day that are on a safe regimen of steroids. And not only that, they didn't produce any type of names. They didn't have any specifics. The only thing they had was that thing that like raised estrogen or
Right. It was that
It was
the name that
letrozole.
it was mislabeled or something. Yeah.
Letrozole.
Letrozole. Okay.
yeah, that's the only thing they ever found, and
Right.
that's not even typically something that
Well,
people
my thought
take.
is, wouldn't there be some kind of electronic record of this?
Mhm.
Like, I mean, you should be able. I mean, it's 2025. Shouldn't you be able to find the purchase, the records of this?
Sure. Well, I
Email
feel
confirmation.
Right, something.
A tracking number.
I feel like in Natalie's diabolical brain, I'll say it, diabolical brain, she had this bullet point list that she has Googled over time of, okay, steroids. Typically, people go to Mexico to get these. So we'll mention Mexico. Oh, we're in America. People don't like Mexico, but I mean, even though we do, but she's just thinking it sounds worse to say Mexican steroids than Rhode Island steroids. So that's check one. Check two, CLL seems to be the cancer.
Mm.
That's hard to diagnose. Maybe I'll just say I have that. I could get away with that. I think a lot of these things were going on of like,
Mhm.
and you could get them legally. I mean, people are on testosterone
Sure.
legally.
Sure.
Now, granted, he probably wouldn't fall in the criteria
Well,
of that.
okay,
but-
let's say he was doing this. Could she have put the insulin in his steroids and then?
So insulin would have to be injected to kill somebody.
But it couldn't be injected in the steroid bottle.
Well,
and
yeah.
then
Okay, so you're saying like put it in the bottle. Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, that
so
could
if
be
he
a
was
thing.
using steroids, you could say that.
I mean, yeah. And then she couldn't provide the bottle because it'll also have insulin in it. But I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I think he was on a bunch of vitamins and creatine from GNC like every other typical gym rat.
Right. That's very like normal for
Mhm.
people to take, even people who aren't,
I take quite a
focusing
few.
on-
Yeah. Well,
it's
he's
very
like,
normal to
he's
take, like,
saying,
multiple
so I was
supplements.
curious how that would affect the jury, like saying 30 Mexican supplements or, whatever. Isn't that true every day?
I
And
take 10.
mine's
People
12.
take a
So I
lot.
counted mine too. I was, I got,
I just take the gummies.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm like
Half
a
of mine are
child.
too. So
I
Yeah,
can tell you,
those are the best.
I got vitamin B3. I got 2 creatine tablets. I got a nootropic, which was mentioned. And I'm like, nootropic is literally brain food. What are we talking about here? Fish oil, vitamin D3. I think I already said. Anyway, I don't want to bore people. But anyway, someone in his type of health, and it's not bodybuilder shape. He's more CrossFit athletic
Mhm.
type shape.
and I think Chris Davis would have known.
Yeah. Oh,
But-
yeah.
Well,
Oh, and
he's-
Chris is in shape too.
Yeah,
You can tell.
I think
Well, I think Victor asked him. He
Yeah.
asked all
Oh,
of the
if-
men up
if they
there
were-
if they were bodybuilders.
Yeah. Now the pilot looked like he's yoking some weights.
Mhm.
I'll just say that dude is spending some time
right.
in the gym. But go ahead, Josie.
I was gonna just obviously like with the quote unquote like Mexican steroids, there wasn't a lot of proof presented that Michael was taking them.
There was
but
no proof.
that's true. There was absolutely besides the kid saying.
Right.
But I'm curious too. There's also a lot of the claims that the defense made. There was like practically no proof, and kind of in line with that was Natalie's cancer, diagnosis or what. So like, what was that like? Were you waiting to actually get proof? Like, oh, like eventually they're gonna prove that Michael was on these steroids, or oh, eventually they're gonna prove Natalie has cancer. Like, what
When-
in your mind? Like, were you waiting for that, or what?
Well,
was that?
we're going through day after day,
Mhm.
and then the prosecution rests. And I remember like looking around, like, what? Like I just wasn't expecting
Mhm.
that. So I was kind of expecting, something else. And then same with the defense when they rested too. I was like, because they told us 3 to 4 weeks.
It was kind of quick, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah.
So I was expecting more.
Mhm.
But
It's so weird that you say that because obviously, like on the outside, I was asking the attorney. So, like, I wasn't surprised. Like, I knew that we
had no clue.
they were cutting down on some of their witnesses. So it was like, oh, this is coming. But yeah, I can't imagine like,
we just
not
show
having-
up every day,
yeah.
have no idea what's coming up. You
Right.
know.
Yeah. Oh, and so I'd like to talk about smoking guns. So I think the prosecution provided a lot of smoking guns, but I want to look at it from the defense side. I feel like smoking guns in Natalie's favor, for instance, would have been cancer records, would have been providing a glucometer would have been providing evidence of Mexican steroids. Is there anything specifically you were waiting on to find proof of that May would have?
Nothing specifically, but there was nothing. You know, they were throwing these theories, but there was nothing really to back the theories.
Yeah. Well, and it's an odd thing to mention in a text message. She said his sugar was 145, and then there's no glucometer. Did that ever come into conversation?
I don't think so, but I mean, I don't have one. Like,
yeah,
I wouldn't. And why she didn't find one later? You know, they didn't. Stephanie Hamilton said she didn't see one there.
If they provided one, they keep the sugar, so she could have shown. See, 145. In your face, you know.
Yeah, but and I've thought about this. I wonder if she thought about that and said, "Oh, well, then they could see that the sugar recording was wrong." So I don't, you know what I mean? So she's smart.
Yeah.
So
very. But
did you get that perception early on that, like, even regardless of what you feel, like she was a very intelligent woman to be able to crack
for sure, absolutely. I mean, these are well trusted people in the community that trusted her with a lot of money. So, yeah.
Millions of dollars. I mean.
And, you know, I think we all know someone that has these narcissistic vibes. And if you do, you see it.
It's a different thing. And I think hers was narcissism with a dash of steroids, pun intended, because she could sell, I mean, go out and try to sell $500,000.
Yeah.
To anyone.
Yeah.
You know, check out this contract. Ooh, look, what do we have behind door number 2, Johnny? Look, you're going to get a return of $3.5 million. All you got to do is give me $500,000 a day. And they're like, okay, well, that looks great. You know,
I would like to know more about that, you know, because how did she do this? You know?
And I fully, you know, we're going to dive into all of this. I think she's just that diabolical and good and had good salesmanship, because I've heard she's a very, very charismatic person for people that have interviewed her. I've never heard her talk. I'm still curious what she sounds like. But yeah.
I heard her briefly in the courtroom. Like, she would talk to some of her family members, very like soft spoken.
Yeah.
From just the brief interactions that I heard. I don't know if that was just because she was in the courtroom or what, but
yeah. Well, judging by Daphne, I would say that's definitely true.
You know, like beforehand, I knew about the Ponzi scheme, but I didn't really even know what it meant or the details behind it. So I I listened to your podcast, and that's where I learned all of that stuff. So I didn't really have a huge background knowledge on that.
Yeah. All y'all had was what you was dealt in the 8 days.
Right. Like, I knew about it, but didn't know the details.
Which was honestly, it was the best possible situation to have a jury, because I know there was conversations about moving the case out of the county just because they never thought they could get an unbiased jury. But I think, like you said, like 2019, Michael died. She goes to prison in 2021. It's 2020. Like, there was so much time for people to kind of just not only remember the barest details, that it helped.
Well, a lot of the jury was very young.
Oh, I didn't.
Very young. Like
That's
20, 21. Like, so they were kids.
Yeah, they wouldn't have read any of this.
So I think that was why they were picked.
And a lot of them were females too, if I can remember.
There were, so including alternates, there were 10 females, 4 males.
Did you think that was purposely?
Absolutely. Half of the females had children, half of the males had children. So I thought that was interesting as well, because that question was asked.
But all y'all came in like, okay, you're the middle of the rope in the tug of war. Like, you can be swayed either way, and you came in just ready to look at the facts.
Honestly, thinking about it before we went back, I was like, we're going to run in there and like start screaming because we haven't been able to talk, but that's not really what happened. We elected someone to be the foreperson, and then like, what do you're just standing there like, what do we do?
Yeah.
And before we dove into any of the evidence, we just said, you just want to take a vote. And so we had took an initial vote, and it was clear that the majority of the jury felt a certain way. We wanted the majority felt she was guilty, and we wanted to make sure they proved she was guilty. So if we had any issues, we talked about that issue, went on the evidence list, pulled that evidence out, and attacked it that way.
So it was decisively unanimous,
Yes.
but not completely.
Yes.
So you were
Gotcha.
very detached when you were trying to go over
Yes.
everything. That's
Yeah.
the only
Got
way
it.
to do it, I think, really.
Mhm. So we found a problem and then looked in the evidence for the solution.
And let the evidence point, and then ultimately became unanimous.
Right.
Gotcha.
It didn't take too long.
Yeah, it's under 2 hours, I think.
Did it feel like it was that long?
The mercy phase felt a lot longer. I don't know why it did.
It did to me too.
It felt heavier too.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, well
It was a lot harder for me.
it was straight emotion for 8 hours.
Right. Well, that's what, on the way driving in that morning, I'm like, what I'm doing right now is to go to see who can make me cry harder. That's how I felt.
Who you
like,
could connect to the most.
well, no, I felt like it's almost torture. Both sides. Like,
Yeah.
who can I,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Do you
That's-
think-
it's hard?
And we'll get into mercy phase for sure. So yeah, Chris Davis testifies, ends day 2. We're into day 3, which is,
Did we get to the medical experts?
see who we got here. No, it's
Yeah.
we have the contractor, which the contractor's role, fact check me, but Natalie contacted him to come over and help her move him on the couch.
Yeah, there was 2 contractors. They were together. They were at Lowe's, and she contacts them to come move Michael off the kitchen floor onto the couch.
And the other contractor passed away from a car crash
He
in
did,
between
yeah.
these several years, because everything in this case is just insane, but it has no affiliation to anything other than
No, just-
us very sorry for his loss.
Yeah.
Sorry for his family. I didn't catch his name, but this guy, I think his name's Jason Bowen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was, his last name was Miller, the gentleman.
Miller. Okay.
Passed away.
Let me get
I
it
believe so.
correct here. So we got
Jason. Oh, and then we
Yeah.
did the FBI chemist.
Jason Bowen, and then we had the chemist. So did you find anything weird about the amount of people that came to this house while her husband was unconscious and unresponsive?
Yeah. I don't know that many people, not on a daily basis. Yeah.
9 people to come to your house.
If
Then?
9 people are coming to my house, my immediate family members are going to be in those 9 people,
That's true. Yeah.
including my husband's mother.
Yeah, and she didn't contact Donna till he was in ICU.
Were you curious at all that, like, I think it was eventually said that the sister was there, but again, like there was no parents of either one. There was no.
I mean, and I know everybody has a different relationship with their families, but both of my families, it would be there. So that was odd to me.
Yeah.
Sure. So yeah, he talks about, and this guy, he's a contractor for their properties.
He
random
mentioned
stuff.
that he did work. So they had a business location for the tactical business, which was doing all the fake contracts. They had a location. I believe it was stated that he worked. He was doing stuff at the location, and then he also did stuff in the Cochran's home.
Gotcha.
So it was kind of like a dual thing.
Okay, and then we end his. It's very weird, the whole situation. Then the FBI chemist gets up, and we hear
I think we see for the first time the bottle of insulin.
Right. He looked at the outside, or no, he looked at the inside,
Contents.
the
Yeah.
contents.
I think too.
That was a really long testimony too.
And it was so
'Cause they
like
taking the bags out, like
Oh God.
it was long.
Yeah, and there's like this goes into this, and this is A, and this is B, and then this is A for this, and this is like, yeah, I remember
Mhm.
that was a long.
And it's like evidence 13 to 17, or and like, whew.
And all of those were admitted too, right?
Yes.
Did you actually like pull out the vial?
Yeah, they were
like,
there.
What was that like? I don't know, handling it,
I
or was
mean,
it?
we
just-
didn't take it out of bags or anything. But
How
I mean,
full
it
was it?
there. It was empty.
It was empty.
Oh,
the one.
That's right.
Because they had.
The actual Humalog bottle was empty because he transferred it into a separate vial. He did that with every single.
And then so the defense was saying, "Look at this bottle. That looks pretty full to me, doesn't it?"
Well, the thing is, like I said, I know someone whose child has diabetes, and I know the size of a unit. So you can take some out, and I mean, you wouldn't know.
I was curious because it's my estimate. So there's 1,000 units in a bottle. I think he got at least 50. And you're not really going to notice too much. 50
especially someone who doesn't have experience looking at a vial.
Yeah.
I don't think that was... I mean, they're just throwing out anything they can.
They're like, look at that photo. Isn't that kind of... And it's like...
It's so hard to tell. That photo was
just can't...
You really couldn't see in the photo. I mean, it's printed on a piece of paper. And it's not even a real photo.
Yeah, and first off, the bottles aren't filled that high. I opened a brand new bottle on a test I did for a video, and they're pretty low. Like, there's some variability there. So...
Do you remember... I remember it was kind of... I don't know. Not like funny, but just like interesting that I remember seeing the bottle of Humalog and it being in like her little like in the drawer of the fridge. And there was like Snickers.
I remember seeing that.
Like just how odd it was that like it was just like a random thing just put in with all your other condiments.
I felt like maybe it was a trophy.
Possibly.
She's opening that fridge every day, looking at that bottle of insulin.
I mean, listen, there's a lot of serial killer traits here. Now, granted, she's not a serial killer. She only murdered one person. But there's a lot of things that it seems like
Why would you keep it?
Yeah.
You think she forgot about it? Or?
No, absolutely
I mean, you
not.
can't forget about that. I think there's certain things that she would have in her mind, and this is just speculation. But I don't know if you watched videos after the trial of the Betsy Britland situation, which came up during the trial, and you all probably didn't even like, okay, well, that's just a made up name.
Fake
That's
employee.
weird.
Yeah, I didn't think twice about it.
But Betsy actually has a place in the community of Natalie, or this is the theory of her actually being a person that Natalie went to church with. And I think there's a lot of these things in her brain that give her comfort. And maybe excitement in knowing. I don't know. But yeah, you would think. But then again, she probably has to keep it because Jennifer said literally she brought it there.
Right. But I don't know if Jennifer would have remembered. I mean, they would have been text messages. But I think because it was brought up. It wasn't brought up in this, which I was really curious about. It was brought up in a previous hearing with Bledsoe that Natalie mentioned throwing away all of Michael's other supplements. So like it wouldn't have been too out of character to also get rid of the insulin. Again, she could have said she used it all, right? I mean, this was 6 months after Michael died that they searched her house. So like, I mean, sure, there's text messages knowing that she had access to insulin that day, but if they hadn't found it, I don't know if it would have been that obscure.
I see what you're saying. It is very odd. I don't like anything involved with this, but the trophy theory, I mean, I think that's relative. And for those listening, I'm chewing trail mix. I made sure to pack ahead.
Are you okay?
Oh, I'm good. No, I got plenty of trail mix to keep that, to keep that glucose up. So don't worry. But came prepared. But yeah. So the Humalog was a big deal. Obviously,
I found it interesting when he said that the contents of one did not match the label. So when he said that, didn't know what it was at that point, but it was very interesting that it did not match.
And you get to hear from Stanley for the first time too. Now I remember being like trying to stay awake for Stanley because he's just so like monotoned and like long-winded. So like, what was that like?
It's like, ooh,
him?
Someone new, and then you're like, oh.
But my man can dress.
Exciting.
My man can dress, looking sharp in the courtroom.
Oh, look, he's wearing like it's tight, yeah.
But
he's very. Did you realize that at that point that Matthew was doing all the like personal witnesses, and Stanley he did all the like medical witnesses or like the technical.
I don't
ones.
think I realized that at the time,
Mhm.
but it was clear that they each had chosen, certain ones to focus on.
Yeah.
Sure.
I want to know, like, I'm just imagining him like printing out these like long lists of questions and,
Just a brief moment.
It's a little dry.
oh yeah, I just have a brief.
I'm like, okay.
You're like, we know you now, Stanley.
Well, he fired it up like, Your Honor, these lights, I can't
Oh
focus
yeah,
on anything.
There's a glare.
Started it out. Yeah, that's the only thing we heard of him before day 3
Mm-hmm.
was the glare, and they
Or
got
I
it
can't.
fixed.
What was that like? Like, oh, I can't hear you. Like having him.
I could hear.
Lord Jesus, thank you for bringing that up.
Please.
Oh my God, I forgot all about
Or
that.
you're talking too fast. Like, was that like?
I get it. We get it. Like, chill.
That's what I was saying. I was like, with most West Virginians, we can't. We got to talk
He
slow.
sat right there. Like he was right by the witnesses too. So it's like, do we need like one of those special like, poor Stanley? But he,
I think it hurt him. I think it hurt the flow.
I will say though,
Oh, for sure.
I've seen him in this is just Stanley. There was no, I don't know if it's a tactic that he uses, but he is like this for everything. So, I mean,
Yeah.
he can't hear. He likes things to go at a
Things
his own
could have
pace.
been a lot shorter.
That's true.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And listen, I'm sure Stanley's a great dude, but very dry.
They
We're
were
going to
doing
get
their
into
job.
the mercy stuff too.
They were doing their job.
They were doing their job. And they definitely, threw everything but
All
the
good
kitchen sink at it. That's for sure.
Yeah. And again, you can't, because obviously like we're all focused on Natalie's reaction, but you can't see her reaction to anything while you're up there or while you're in the
Not
box.
where I was sitting.
Okay.
I'm sure others might have had a better view, but honestly, I just tried not to.
To just look at the witnesses.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So we end day 3 with the expert, and we are into day 4, which starts off with the very blurry image of the one guy had to get his Zoom fired up, or is it Diane? No, it's Diane
Oh.
Kruger.
Yeah, that was funny.
look and see what, because I've said her name incorrect a couple of times.
It looks like.
Is it Krieger or Kreiber?
Let me look up.
It's Krieger. Okay, good. That's I think
Krieger.
what I've been saying. Yeah.
She was like holding up or they were holding up like signs.
Yeah, they
and-
couldn't. Were you in the courtroom
Yeah.
for a lot of that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That was, I think, one of the first kind of technical difficulty that took forever. And then there were many, many to follow after that.
It seemed like generational technical difficulties, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, there were times
little boomer tech going on.
Yeah.
you missed it, but right after Krieger, we went to lunch, and when we came back, it was supposed to be the medical examiner, and he could not get the Zoom to work. And it ended up what ended up happening, it took I think over an hour to get to him, and they were going back and forth, and it ended up being suggested like, oh, we'll just like FaceTime us from your phone. Like, because that's what I think ended up happening. It was a phone, and he was like, "Oh, I have a flip flop phone." We're like, "You don't have a smartphone." So like, I think I just remember.
I didn't know any of that.
No, like because you guys are out of the room,
and we're like, what is taking so
Mhm.
long?
It was that. It was just it took forever to get him to be on.
Because there was quite a few instances of that.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Some of it was because Matthew and Stanley were wanting to bring things up, and the judge was like, "Okay, we have to discuss this."
Gotcha.
But a lot of it was just technical difficulties.
Yeah, and Krieger's was important because she lays out that
Mhm.
essentially she's 90-some% sure that he died
Right.
of insulin shock, and here's why.
Mm-hmm.
She was, very knowledgeable and very important.
Yeah,
How did you respond to? Obviously, Stanley was asking for, give me 100% guarantee that.
Well, what doctor gives you a 100% guarantee?
it's not going to happen.
It's never.
Right.
Yeah, but I mean,
So that did nothing.
Yeah, she was up there. So it proved like, okay, yes, we start hearing his sugar was 21
Mm-hmm.
when he went to the hospital. This is not normal.
Is this when he brought up the chart?
Yeah.
Let's go by line.
Because I think, is this when he print it out for, printed it out for
Yes.
you guys, right?
Yes.
I think this might have been, yes, because
On the cross?
there was a break, and we had to take a break to print
Right.
it out.
Right.
I think that, and
it just took a long time and it was unnecessary.
Mhm. He was asking like, was the insulin in his body at this point?
Right.
I
Yeah.
forgot about that. Yeah.
The
The chart that we later find out was from Dr. I think I've been saying her name wrong, but it is Banerjee.
Who did not have all the evidence.
Yes.
Which is we'll definitely get into.
Mm-hmm.
So we got lunch break after. Well, hang on. Who is this? Forensic examiner.
Oh, he just the one that said he looked at the vials.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. So his was pretty quick.
Yeah.
Well, it was good that he said that the insulin had been punctured.
Mhm. Yeah.
So that was important.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if they can't prove a puncture mark, it
Right.
is a new bottle.
And the other two were not punctured.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
one was the steroid and one was the mislabeled.
Right. One was the steroid that Natalie acquired. We
For
think
illness.
it was the one that she acquired that day from Stephanie that she didn't use, that she desperately needed.
And his was important because it was pre-FBI chemist, correct? Where he took the
No.
insulin. Oh, was
It
it?
was
Okay.
He was after.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. But again, it was just that significant. It's
Mhm.
punctured. It was used.
Gotcha. All right. So we got the. So we end the day. We got Kubacek,
Mm-hmm.
which was the flippy flop phone guy.
Yeah. The medical the medical examiner.
Now, did his carry on to the following day?
No.
Or was it okay?
Yeah. I don't know how you felt about it.
Wait, which one was he?
He was the one who did the first autopsy from the state.
He was hard to hear.
It was very hard to hear him. I didn't think he added much though, because he basically just said, "Yes, couldn't find anything."
Honestly, I felt like, I don't know. You know how you pick and choose which hospital you go to? You don't want to go to this one because I just felt like, I kind of felt like those vibes. Like they're busy. There's one.
Sure. No,
It was also 7 months after. You know what I
After,
mean?
yeah.
Like there were just many things that played into that I
Mhm.
just don't. I mean,
Was it ever brought up the quick burial?
No, I think he's the first one who says the embalmment didn't seem to be very well done.
Right.
well, and we talked about that too, but do we know how well that process really goes?
Right.
We don't exhume bodies all the time. Like,
Mhm.
so we don't know.
Especially twice.
Right.
And then show the photos to the mom
Well, to
Yeah.
the court.
or to the court.
Did you see? I remember the daughter and Natalie's mom both walked out. Did you see
Right.
people walking out, or did that register?
Yes. And I think that Donna Bolt had been told like something's coming.
It was semi-clear something. Yeah.
Because I saw some stirring
Mhm.
and then I saw them leave and I thought it was unnecessary. I looked because I felt I had a responsibility to look, but I didn't look for long.
Sure.
Yeah, and it was not aired.
Oh,
on the-
okay.
Yeah.
Thankfully.
Well, yeah, I'm
Mhm.
glad.
Some of the family members asked Court TV afterward, and they said, no, we didn't air it.
Good. Good job, Court TV. They
Yeah.
did air the one of him on the floor, which did upset a lot of family members and stuff like that too.
For that, I felt like we didn't print it. We didn't print that. That was a discussion that we had at the Register Herald, was whether or not to print that photo. I was very opposed to it, and my editor did agree. But I think it was important to the trial to at least show that photo. I think that kind of...
I agree because we needed to know that photo was taken.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
for sure. And I think you had to show it, right?
Well, and the thing is, we saw it over and over, but those witnesses were just seeing it once.
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And it's that, especially the one of him on the ground. I don't know how relative, I think the point of them showing him after the exhumation was to show like, well, you couldn't tell if there were tumors,
Right.
but like, my goodness.
I think you could have asked him to describe, is this typical? Is this what you
Sure.
because obviously the photos were taken because it was an autopsy and that's part of the process. So it was done as part of a general duty, but I think you could have just had him describe them,
Yeah.
or you could have shown him the photos.
it didn't play an impact. I don't think it mattered. And
It just
if
was
it played
upsetting, I'm sure.
any impact, it was a negative one.
Mhm.
Sure. Yeah, I that's what I was thinking. I'm glad you said that. So the next day, we are into day 5, and it's the forensic pathologist, Uribe,
Yeah.
and his was the second exhumation.
Yes.
Okay.
2023.
Yes. And the reason for the second exhumation, and I'm interested, I'm going to tell you what we're planning, I don't know, with legislation. But with the second exhumation, the goal was obtaining a certain test.
Correct. The prosecutor at the time was told that there was a specific insulin test that could be done that could detect insulin, I think, in like the tissues.
Do we know if it was the C-peptide test? I mean, about had to have been.
I don't honestly know, because it was they said it was a specialized test. But again, like when the media asked questions of the former prosecutor, we weren't given any specifics about what the test was, but it was a test that they said could be done post-death.
Gotcha. Okay.
Tell.
And so unfortunately that couldn't happen because it was 4 years later and there was only bones.
Bones, correct.
Mm-hmm. But his was still, that got him into the trial. And was there anything particularly that jumped out to you first?
Well, I think he kind of confirmed Krieger's assumptions about the case. He kind of validated that, and he went through the same process that she did, saying, I eliminated everything else, and the only credible explanation is if he was injected with insulin. So they kind of helped each other by both being experts and both coming to the same conclusion.
I agree. I mean, I thought it was important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could tell from their background that like they knew, like they were very informed about this case.
He felt passionate, I felt like. And he was just being interrogated. But he stuck with how he felt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's very professional.
I feel like this dude in like old school Tombstone would have sold coffins to people or something. I mean, he just looks like such a cool character.
I feel like he looked at the whole picture. He looked, I mean, if I remember correctly, he was looking at the police stuff as well.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
And so he was looking at the full picture, whereas and the other medical experts that we saw after this from the defense did not have that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
No, it was
so that's how we looked at those medical experts.
Makes sense. And then after him, we have mid-morning break, and we got Timothy Bledsoe, which was very important because he investigated the financial crime.
And later the murder.
It was a long day.
Yeah.
Oh,
for
that
him.
was a long, yeah. And because
I think he finished it out, did he? Let me see here.
I think,
Yep.
yeah, he was the final witness of the prosecution, I believe.
Was that the final one? It may be,
so.
yeah, because
I
day
think
6
so.
was the family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he closed it out for them.
So we see a lot of text messages this day. How do you remember specifically this being the last witness? You mentioned being surprised they were done, but do you remember specifically being like, okay, well, yeah, did they kind of, the burden of proof, did they prove it, or were
I was
you still
feeling
wanting?
a certain way.
Yeah.
But I mean, we still had a good ways to go.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
And that's kind of the point of the prosecution's case is like, you're not
Right.
really hearing anything from the defense yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's done that way purposefully. Like they're the one that has the burden, so you hear from them first, and then obviously when it's the defense's turn, it's obviously skewed towards their client.
Gotcha. Okay. And so, yeah, he provides a bunch of text messages of like showing Natalie actively working in the financial scheme, objections flying like mad. And then eventually investigating the murder. He's retired now, correct?
They're both retired. Both of the investigators are retired.
Yeah. So wrapping up.
I think this is the day too. I know the jury had been dismissed, but the judge meets with, it was either this day or the following day, the judge meets with Natalie privately.
we came in at 10 instead of 9.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we knew at that point that Natalie had agreed to testify. Obviously, I believe you guys weren't aware or weren't told.
We had no idea.
We were, so I think when the defense starts, when the defense starts their case, we had been told Natalie would testify. So it was interesting knowing that information. And obviously you guys were just kind of waiting to see what would happen.
Right.
Were you interested if she was going to?
I honestly never thought she would. I know in most cases it's, they usually don't recommend it because it's, I figured Truman would.
Especially when you're lying. It'd be a tough thing,
I just know that I think it's more common to not testify than to testify. So that, honestly, I never thought she would.
Sure. The way I saw it, I made a little funny post, which I'm sure you didn't see, but I said, if I'm innocent and my attorney asks me to testify, you better slot out 17 hours because we're gonna lay out some receipts.
I felt that way too.
Yeah. I mean, and she knew, I heard this from a person closely involved with this. They said, how I always learned to try this as a defense is if it's the truth, you pound the truth. If it's the law, you pound the law. If it's something else, you pound the table with objections. And I was like, that's kind of a way to look at, like, yeah, they were pounding the table the whole time. And it just made so much sense. So yeah, she knew she would have been twisted into infinity and beyond. She'd have been Buzz Lightyear at the end of this. But anyways, so you kind of were expecting her not to?
Yeah, I never thought about it.
Yeah. Okay, so we end day 5 and we go into day 6, which is the first day of the defense. And they call first to the stand was the registered nurse,
right?
Which was Brianna Holly, and she basically was to say that Natalie was added onto.
Natalie could administer the insulin to Jennifer and Chris's son at school. That she was like a,
like put her on the short list,
right?
Of
Essentially,
yeah.
Well, my thoughts on that were there would be paperwork,
right? She was like, it was like I remember 5 minutes, and then the prosecution didn't ask a single question.
There would be paperwork. That's what I thought. There was zero paperwork.
Well, you would have like a form that says, "Here's the emergency
there
contact."
There would be a sign, like a parent would have to sign off on that.
Okay, and about
at least I think. I would hope.
I mean, you would think so. I'm sure
to protect the school, because if someone just shows up and says, "Oh, I can administer insulin to a diabetic,"
you can't even send your kid to school with a cough drop. So
yeah, I have to go and administer Tylenol if my kid gets a headache. But yeah, and not saying Brianna's lying, but maybe there's some poor record keeping. I mean, there should be paperwork.
And again, like she's remembering this from 5 years ago.
Yeah, for sure.
So, facts, paperwork would be, yeah.
So, they start off, they're like, ooh, we're going to start off with this. And it kind of, to me, fell flat. It was like, okay, like, they're kind of best friends. I mean, it makes sense for her to be an approved contact. I mean, it wouldn't have changed my mind either way.
You'd already heard from Jennifer saying no, that wasn't the case. So it was like, who's more convincing of a witness?
Sure.
If there would have been paperwork, that would have been convincing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. See, that's the way you should do it. I get all emotional. I'm like, God, I'm so emotional. But anyway, but the facts made me emotional. I came into this as unbiased as possible. And then I was like, oh, yeah, he died of insulin. Like, there's no doubt in my mind. And then it kind of twisted my mentality. But so we got
the kids,
which I'm sure was not fun.
No, I can't imagine putting them in that situation. And you guys didn't see the son's testimony, but he was emotional.
Mm-hmm.
And if you saw the mercy phase, you saw she was emotional. Natalie was emotional for her family, and that was the same case with the testimonies. And at the end, he mouthed, "I love you" to her, and it was heartbreaking. I mean, heartbreaking. And I was upset all evening. This poor child. And I don't think that should have been allowed. But, I think that they let her by with some things,
Was it tough hearing the kids really contradict all of the other, especially with the steroids? They were the ones who really said Michael was taking steroids. Also, Michael was involved in the Ponzi scheme.
Well, they were young children. And it was clear at this point, like you said, we've been there for a long time. We've seen who's in the audience. We see who sits with who. By this point, you're figuring out, where these kids are getting their information from. And I think they were wholeheartedly felt like they were, telling the story of their lives.
Listen, they love their mom. There's no doubt. What started to upset me, other than, I hated they had to go through this, but this is kind of, to me, when Michael started getting thrown in the mud a little bit.
Well, I didn't like how they were leading, too much in these interviews.
The question that really got to me was, it was something along the lines of, so you were like desperate for your father's attention, or
teenage girls are tough, period, in any family. And I didn't think much about that because, father-daughter relationships, especially with a teenager, are tough. So, and it's not, untypical for a dad to be closer with a son than with a daughter. So,
Yeah.
And the stages,
I don't think she would have said that had he not led her to that.
Exactly.
Oh, well, yeah, he would say a paragraph and she'd be like, yes. Mm-hmm. But again, heart goes out to them. They suffered more than anyone really in the whole thing. But yeah, like you said, it was just kind of, I started catching this vibe of like, oh, they're going with Michael was like not an attentive father, like not a good person. Mm-hmm. Like that's what and then they carried that all the way through to the very end.
The thing with the daughter's testimony with me is she seemed to make you think that Natalie did nothing with the business, and it was already proven that she had. So that
it's kind of like, well, she didn't know. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, if she thinks her dad's doing all this and her mom's doing nothing, like that's odd.
It's very odd.
So that stuck out to me.
It seems like if someone is to look at this objectively and then have this opinion like, well, I want to protect my daughter no matter the cost, they kind of have to turn their ears off and just go like this. And they're like, I'm not going to read anything. I'm just going to just talk and I don't care. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, it seemed like there was a lot of rationalization going on of, I'm just not going to listen to what I don't want to hear. You know what I mean?
I can't imagine being in those shoes. Who knows?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And
it's awful.
And two, like the kids, they've already went through the stages of grief and they're literally battling for their mom now. Mm-hmm. So they've dealt with their dad's dying, being murdered, but, they don't think that, but they've dealt with it and they've moved on to the next stage, which is, I want my mom in my life. So that's kind of,
and I get it. Yeah. 100%.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Me too. And that's what I told Josie. I was like, I'm not going to be critical about them at all. Like, I totally understand. And even the sister too, like Penny got up there, and I am curious how, like, these people lost tons of money and they are still kind of saying, well, we weren't really victims. Daphne eventually said, yeah, I lost $276,000, but I'm not really a victim. Did that kind of strike you odd, or?
I mean, it was clear that there was a lot of love in that family. I mean, they were sticking behind their loved ones, and I can't fault them for that. I don't know how I would handle it, but I mean, they're having her back.
Yeah.
I think time to kind of healed some of maybe the wounds that were there.
Sure.
You know what I mean? At that point.
Yeah. If this was fresh, it might have been different.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense. Are you comfortable?
Yeah.
Well, okay. We got about 3 hours left. So no, I'm kidding. It won't be that long. No, if you need a break, just tell me. We can. All right.
Treadway.
Oh, yeah. So we got Penny, and then we got Treadway comes up, which had the most Perry Mason type moment for Tom Truman, for me personally, of the
email
trial, which was the text message. which said, quote, they were kind of going back and forth. Did you find any of these text messages odd before I say, the exact text message? But
Well, I mean, yes. I wish that I could have seen my face. I'm sure that I had a reaction. I don't know if you guys were watching.
I was too focused on trying to read the text that I didn't look at you guys.
Right. Some people don't trust the police.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the vibe I was getting. I don't think he did anything for them.
I don't think so either.
sure, yeah. And that's kind of what I was bringing up is like, well, some people just offer you advice even when you don't ask
Sure,
for it.
right.
And they're a little overbearing.
But he was trying to offer her like alibi advice.
I mean, yeah, that's...
I don't understand.
Oh,
I don't understand either.
sorry, Siri.
I think it could have been taken either way.
That's true too. Like,
Yeah. Sure, yeah, that's the thing. And then the text message in it said, she was referring like, okay, well, the police, may talk to you, this and that.
Mhm.
I don't know verbatim what the text was, but then he said, they won't get from me.
yes.
Right.
And hearing Tom Truman say it made my
He's-
month.
Yeah. Well, he was like, he wanted him to say it. And he's like, I don't remember. Or like, maybe I said that. And he's like, well, here it is.
It was entertainment, and
Yes.
we've been sitting there a really
That's
long
true.
time. So yeah, it was juicy. So interesting.
Was you surprised that the defense called him?
I didn't really think. I don't know. I didn't think it was really. I don't think it helped them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's what I felt with a lot of the witnesses. Now the kids obviously help, but there's a opinion in the community of like, regardless if you did this or not, how do you put your kids through this is kind of what people are in general saying.
I think though, like for the kids, they clearly wanted to help their mother. And so I'm sure there was a conversation along the lines.
They're
of,
almost adults at this
Yeah, they're
point.
young adults.
Yeah.
now.
I'm sure if you testify, it will help your mother. You know what I mean? I'm sure that was expressed to them
Sure.
because obviously like, if we don't hear from Natalie, you kind of want the next best.
And she could have told them no, don't
Yeah,
do it.
she-
So we
yeah.
don't know that.
You're right.
It was up to her kind of. She could have told her attorneys they're not being,
That makes
they
sense.
won't testify.
You're right. There's a lot of assumations. Is that a word?
Assumptions.
Oh,
Yeah, we don't-
assumptions. Okay, yeah, that's the word.
No words. Yeah.
We don't know. We
Assumations.
won't
That-
know.
Yeah.
Jeez Louise, bear with me, y'all.
Are you good?
Yeah. Oh, I'm good. Yeah. I got a whole thing of
Okay.
trail mix in me. I got 2 things of trail mix in me now. And then we have the son's testimony. You mentioned that really heartfelt moment. They couldn't show his face.
Mm-mm, that was the judge's decision.
Yeah. Which is, he's still a minor, so totally understandable. So day 6, I left day 6. I thought that the defense, this was their best day by far.
Yeah.
Um,
That day, I couldn't move my neck like left or right for 2 days. I was just carrying the stress in my neck, and I think I was grinding my teeth,
Mhm.
sitting in there. And that was just like kind of like the peak of, you know what I mean? It was a lot.
Yeah.
yeah.
Emotionally really heavy.
I was exhausted at that point.
Oh, there's no doubt. And you're like, holy, how many days are we going? Which that was the end of day 6. So we carry into day 7. I honestly thought the kids were going to be their last witnesses, but they didn't end up
Yeah.
being. So we had, first we had Dr. Dragovich,
Mm-hmm.
who was an interesting character, but he was basically trying to rebut the, insulin death with, actually, we really don't know what it was.
Right. Yeah.
My thoughts on him were he didn't have all the information either,
Mm-hmm.
right?
No. Yeah. He kind of
There was a lot of mistakes, and
in his little report.
and they brought up the fact that he had sent them a draft, and when they went through the edits, they were just edits. But
Mhm.
when you're paying a medical professional to do something, I don't know.
Mm,
That
understand.
was weird to me.
Seemed a little sloppy.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I definitely can see that. I think that was it the prosecution brought up, I don't know, there's a word change, like infant was
Infant, I
mentioned
think,
in
yeah.
it. And there's like random things like that.
Random, yeah.
And something on this, you want
This
no
is
mistakes.
so important,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I mean, this is someone's
And
life.
if they did write infant, who knows what, you know what I mean?
What
Who
else?
knows? Who
What
knows?
else is
Right.
there? Yeah, exactly. So we got Dragovich for a while until lunch. And then we have Dr. Halsey, which was probably the most impactful for me as far as the quote cancer end quote goes. But does anything speak out to you specifically
It
about
helped
him?
with the timeline as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because she went to him that morning,
Right.
and said she had sick or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and then he's like, she could have been sick, I don't know, and then I was like, I gave her some promethazine.
Well, I
And-
think he brought up the fact that he gave Natalie 2 drugs that Michael was allergic to. And I'm like, why would you call him as a witness? Because the defense called him.
Mm-hmm.
And previously, we only knew that Michael was allergic to benzos and we didn't know that Natalie had them. But he kind of
Right.
confirmed
And
it.
he confirmed that she had picked them up like days before.
Mhm.
Which was important because Natalie also sprinkled her Teletubby alibi of the sleep medication in the text messages. So I think she did that knowing that she knocked him unconscious.
The blood
My
pressure
thought
pills.
was
Yeah.
the 2 blood pressure pills, were they the benzo?
Yeah, I don't think they were
Right.
blood pressure
Yeah.
pills.
Because
Yeah.
most of those prescriptions they're white pills. And I've done this with my husband a couple times where like I'll present him with just a random prescribed drug and be like, what is this? And he'll like, oh, that's this, that's this, that's this. Like he can tell, like the pharmacists know what a pill is just by what it looks like.
Right.
They'll look for the marking. Like they know what these drugs are.
If your spouse is a pharmacist, do you trust what they're handing over to you is the
100.
correct medicine?
Yeah.
I've questioned it now jokingly, but yeah, 100% you trust what they give you.
Sure. Oh, listen, there's Humalog jokes flying in this house. But yeah, for sure. So, and also Dr. Halsey, because I take Humalog, everybody, calm down. So Dr. Halsey also essentially proves to me that she ain't got no cancer. This lady ain't got no cancer. I mean, let's be real. But he says that she told him about it, and he contacted CAMC, which is who Natalie said that originally diagnosed her.
She had a heart surgery there, and the doctor mentioned that she had cancer.
Exactly. And then said they had no records of it. And then he was trying to refer her to Duke, and they said she has to be diagnosed with CLL.
There was an insurance issue, lots of issues.
Yada, yada, yada. So the mud, it gets a little messy here, but bad for the defense, in my opinion.
I think so.
Yeah, I think after Halsey, it was bad news bears.
Mm-hmm. And then you had Banerjee, I think I'm saying it right, who was, were you there for a lot of the like trying to get her on the phone to listen, or did you not hear any
To
of
the
that?
previous testimony?
Yeah, like making like, oh, is she on the line? She can't hear.
Yes.
I was like expecting her to be just like this super impressive, like accolades out the window, because they wanted her to hear everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it was discussed afterward. Patrick was like, well, we're streaming this. Like, can she not just get it from the stream?
Yeah, I wondered the same thing.
But yeah, I was expecting her to be very, very impressive.
Mm-hmm. I mean, she was knowledgeable, but again, she didn't have all the information.
Sure. So it was just falling flat, kind of. It's like,
Yeah.
well, this is incomplete.
You can't give a whole picture
Mhm.
without all the information.
How did you feel about her specifically discrediting Dr. Krieger because she dealt with live and not dead people, and then Dr. Uribe because she said he gave his opinion
I
too much?
didn't. I mean, I thought, what did you say?
Krieger, right? With
Krieger.
the G? Yeah.
I mean, she deals with insulin. She dealt with that specific issue.
Yeah.
She narrowed it down to all but one. So I didn't think her discrediting her. I didn't really think much of that.
Yeah. And again, there's records of 21,
Mm-hmm.
which, for all you normal pancreatic people out there, your sugar is probably between 80 and 110 unless you just ate. So dangerous, deadly levels are, I think it's 44 and below. And I think Michael was under 44 all day.
And we learned she did that time. I think you can see it in the photo.
Mm-hmm.
She's
That was
the
the
one that
long
did
chart that we had to go, one by one down. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So,
And then they tried to bring up the second shot or, in that. And yes, it could have happened. We don't know. So this really out the window for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, if someone's loaded up with that much insulin, it's going to have a long lasting effect on their body, and it's not going to all absorb.
And, people
at
were
once.
coming and going all day. So there were times that she was there without anyone else. So,
Yeah. And he's unconscious.
right.
I mean, she could have just kept on shooting him up. I mean, we don't know, but I don't think, he was already, he didn't have an autopsy until the first exhumation. So we're not going to find little bruises of needle marks, or, if she hit a vein, you would have seen one. But anyway, I mean, all that being said, great job, prosecution. All right. So that finishes out the day with their forensic pathologist. Go ahead, Josie.
And I think we learn at this point that Natalie has changed her mind and will not testify.
Yeah.
That's when we learned that, obviously.
And it was a big deal
guys
for
had
us,
no-
but
yeah,
y'all
we
could
were-
yeah,
No
okay.
clue.
That was a huge thing, learning that. And because that changed, I think it changed the prosecution's, like they were preparing to question her. And that changed a lot. But obviously, like you guys are just
Yep.
unaware.
Back there talking about the weather.
I know, right?
Yeah. One thing after day 2. So were you all aware of Donna getting removed as a witness?
No.
That did happen outside of the jury's presence.
Did it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, and I thought she was there every day, but there in the beginning, I mean, we were there so much, and there was people in and out, and some of the same people there every day. I honestly thought she was there every day. I didn't know.
Okay. So that didn't really have no kind of,
No.
you didn't know about the letter. You didn't know about anything. Okay.
No.
And you wouldn't have even been able to see Natalie's family either, because they were on the opposite side. But they weren't there either until the defense, because they couldn't watch any of the testimony.
Right.
Yep.
There was a woman that sat there that I thought was her mother, but
Mhm.
then when the mercy face came around, it was identified as an aunt.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
Holy
see,
roller.
like I
Oh,
said,
that's
we're
all
not
right.
talking. We don't know.
Right,
I'm just
yeah.
sitting there making assumptions.
Mhm.
Okay, I got a question for that later. I'll bring it up later. So that ends day 7, and then we are into day 8, in which,
Heinzman.
yep.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the rebuttal.
Rebuttal. Yeah, the rebuttal comes up with Heinzman, and that is basically to prove that Michael was not involved via text message, because nobody ever saw these text messages before this.
It was to rebut the kid's statement. And I think, again, if Natalie had testified, this could have been brought up. They would have been able to show these text messages. But because Natalie didn't testify, they needed another way to kind of bring these up. And that was...
The son specifically talked about a contract.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
that was brought up. So
Mhm.
that's how they were able to do that.
Yeah.
So they went through, and then this was a humorous moment for me when Mr. Victor said, "Show me these text messages he was involved. Show me. I bet, yeah, can you show me?" And then he's like, "There's like 1,000 pages." He's like, "No, show me.
Yeah, you got to watch him look through it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he said, "Judge, you want..."
Well,
Like, I'll do
it was one after another.
It was like, okay, well, then there's this one, that one, this one. Just kept on saying text messages proving Michael was not involved in the financial scheme.
Right.
And him asking for ACHs. At worst, Michael may be an unattentive business owner not looking at the books, at worst.
Mhm.
But he trusted his wife, like me and Josie said.
He did.
As you should.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. So
The thing that stuck out there was the text sent from Michael's phone.
Yeah. I think
That was
Mhm.
big.
yeah. And there was other text, which we can talk about too on the deliberation discussion of,
That text was sent at, I don't know, 1:30 or something, right?
yeah.
Yeah. I
The one
think,
of like, that's thanks, buddy, or...
Well, the photo was at 1:30, and then his photo talking to Chris. Is that what you're
12:30.
talking about?
The photo
No,
was at
there-
12:30.
There was a
Oh,
text
12:30,
from
okay.
Michael to a friend.
Right. At 1:30.
At 1:30,
Mhm.
and the picture was taken prior. So
Yeah.
Michael did not send that text.
Yeah.
That was the big...
Yeah.
That was brought up in the closing.
Yeah. Oh, so they proved she was using his phone.
Well, again, you have to kind of make that leap to say, if Michael is passed out at 12:30, which we have a photo which has a timestamp, how could he possibly have sent that message? And again, you have to remember all the other witnesses and everything else like that. I'm sure that's what they were assuming you would remember.
And we talked about,
Yeah.
like, didn't Treadway try to break into Michael's phone?
Mm-hmm.
So how either she used a thumb, like at that point, was it thumbprint scan? It
Right.
wasn't your face scan. I don't know.
Passcode or
I mean, you could-
or knew a passcode.
Mhm.
But so then why would she need Treadway to break
Right.
in?
Face scans a thought.
Yeah. Well,
Or the
again,
thumb
yeah.
would be easy,
Yep.
mhm.
because then when he is no longer here, she couldn't get into his phone.
Yeah. Well, I think it draws even more suspicion if like you've seen that photo of Michael passed out, you know it occurred at around 12:30 or so, and then you see a text message and you're just like,
Well,
you
they
start to
said he
question.
was
Yeah.
out after that.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah. So you're just it adds to their side and it makes you again question anything that the
Mhm.
defense is saying.
Interesting, because I didn't realize they proved. I mean, that's proven she used his phone to me.
Mhm.
I didn't realize they did that, and I had a theory of
Yeah.
like, well, it hadn't been mentioned. I think she was using his phone to text Chris Davis.
But see, I thought that there was a message to Chris Davis also at around 12:30 where it's between Michael and Chris. I thought it was brought up that Michael texts Chris like, thanks, buddy, or something, but that was never brought up again. Did you see any? Like, I thought there was messages
Yeah,
on.
something like he was sick and he said, well, if you need
Right.
anything, let me know. And he says,
Mhm.
thanks, buddy. That was at some point, but I really wish we could have seen a timeline of like, this is when this was said. This person was
Mhm.
contacted on Natalie's phone at this time, or,
It'd be worth it for someone to make a spider web out there that you can go to online of like, okay, here's the timeline of texts that you can just go one at a time, which I'm sure prosecution
I
may
have
add.
like 90% of that.
Oh, well, there we go.
I did it. It took me like hours, but that's how I remember
Mhm.
the message from Chris. But yeah, I mean, she was contacting, I don't know if like this became like relevant or if you remember, like there were so many messages going out
Yeah, you couldn't
all
keep track
over
of anything.
a couple hour period. And for me, I was like, I have like one group text with like friends. Like I don't really text that many people. You know what I mean? I'm just like, that's
lot.
so
A lot
curious.
going on.
And it's a lot to keep track of. Like it, to text this person, text that. Like it's
Yeah, that's a lot of work. A lot of thoughts, a lot of
For sure.
a lot of loose ends too,
mhm.
which end up closing the slammer on her. But anyways, so Heinzman goes to rebut witness. I felt like that was a great rebut. I'm glad they didn't try to rebut I thought they were going to rebut the fact that he was mentioning of him not being an attentive father, but I'm glad they didn't do that because I didn't want them to seem like they were picking on the kids because, I hate to tell a kid their experience.
Yeah. Well, again, it was just they were trying to just deliver the facts.
Yeah,
again.
the facts about the contracts and showing like, well, actually the kids had no clue about
Yeah.
about the finances. So I thought that was really a good move on their part. Then we got lunch break, jury instructions, which is
That was
pretty
a
good.
It was very long.
Pretty long time. And then we have closing arguments, which is when superhero Akerd steps up, in my opinion, and does a fabulous job. How did her close affect you? I'll just ask.
We've been getting bits and pieces of stories over, 3 weeks with evidence. And she just laid out all of those little stories into a perfect, neat, wrapped present, timeline. And it just, everything made sense
Mhm.
once, that started. When she started her closing, it just laid everything out there.
Sure, yeah. And I did a little crappy 5-minute closing. This one was like, I'm going to use everything, and then here's exactly what happened. And you leave that like, oh, yeah.
It was organized, planned, easy to understand. I mean, straight to the point. She rocked it.
Because you guys couldn't, I know that was mentioned at the beginning. The judge told you guys that he doesn't allow jurors to take notes. He doesn't want to.
Correct.
So like you're having to remember all of this information and kind of trying to put it together. And obviously I thought that her timeline was very helpful.
Very helpful. And when we were looking through the evidence, I was looking for the PowerPoint and we were not given the
I didn't think
PowerPoint.
about that. I asked for it afterwards because I really wanted to look through it as well. Yeah, it wasn't admitted into evidence, so you couldn't.
Right.
Interesting. Like to get a hold of that. So they go do about as great of a job as you could possibly do. Then the defense gets up and kind of, what do you think? I won't give my opinion before you do, but.
Well, it was like opposite strategy. Here you have this perfect little neat, presentation from Ashley, and then it was like just throwing things at us, very, I think it was just meant to be confusing.
Yeah. That's kind of how it came off to me. I mean, there was just
honestly, there were a couple parts that I had to just try to make myself not giggle.
right. Yeah.
The jabbing they talked
Yeah,
about.
and the comment about they were in the bed and
Oh, but they weren't anything sexual.
I was like, well, no one up here was thinking that,
right.
sir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that was unnecessary.
Yeah.
She was reading a book.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
it was
remember
just
that.
odd.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of awkward.
I think he calls
And it
her a
was
bad
not
girl.
easy to follow. Like just opposite of
Mhm.
her.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's what I mean. It was just, I said it was kind of rambly, but and Josie said, well, I think, he did way better than he did on his opening.
I thought it was better than his opening. It was rambling, but I thought he had a direction to it. He was trying to pick apart each point. But again, I do think he was trying to just throw everything at the jury to kind of potentially confuse them.
But, looking at it, here she comes up with this PowerPoint,
Mhm.
black and white, looks good, and he's got a legal pad with notes on it.
Yeah.
And, how long has he been working on this?
The contrast was very, very clear between the two.
Oh yeah, yeah, very. And at this point, it was, so they was on the other side of the world compared to the prosecution. I mean, it's so far from each other at this point that I just like, okay, well, I think we're gonna get a guilty verdict, but I don't know. You never know with things. So they close up. Truman rebuts. He takes 5 minutes to open the projector. Were you thinking this was gonna be some kind of a groundbreaking
Yeah.
graph?
Honestly, he could have just held up that paper.
Yeah. No.
But I get it because those numbers were very important, and he based it all off those two numbers, and they were important. But that made me
He just
giggle.
held it up for the
Yeah.
audience.
It was great. Well, and the numbers he said was 0, which is the amount of theories they provided, which is true, and also 21, which is his glucose when he went to the hospital. And like we know, not going to be 21 people. So anyways, we go into all right, they give you your...
No, they
Oh,
did-
no, this is next day.
The jury decides to, which I was very appreciative of as a reporter.
We were looking around. We were all like,
Please don't make us deliberate. Let's go home.
it's exhausting.
Yeah, I remember-
It's exhausting.
Mhm. Had you got, well, no, you couldn't talk about it. You just,
No.
you could just kind of feel that you wanted to go home for the day. Everyone could just kind
Yes. And I also thought it'd be good to just go home and sit on it for a while.
Yeah.
So y'all looked at each other was like, no, we're going home.
Mhm.
Mhm. It was late too. It had to be like 4:30.
It was a late day. And who knows how long we would spend on
Yeah.
it. We wanted to have plenty of time.
And at that point too, it could have been a situation where you deliberated for an hour, you go home, and then you have to come back and
Mhm.
read. So yeah, I thought it was.
It didn't make sense to start.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we are into the verdict stage. You go in and you all deliberate in the morning. You come in. I think this is word of the chicken biscuits. Was this the first chicken biscuits
No,
day?
we had a Tudor's sausage biscuit that
Nice.
morning.
Ooh, that's quality. So you each had a raw.
He's trying to put you
I
to
will
sleep.
say one morning we had biscuits from the dish and they were incredible.
Wow.
I didn't know they did.
I didn't know-
breakfast.
It was
Yes.
sausage, egg, and cheese, homemade biscuit. And they had bacon too. I had sausage, but incredible.
So you had like a buffet. It's like, here's your stuff. Here.
Kirkpatrick is so, and again, like you mentioned, it was coming out of his own pocket, but like that's
Mhm.
just the kind of person that he is.
Mhm.
I'd want to come back the next morning just for the biscuits. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, one day we had pizza. It was great.
I remember that. He's like, it's not regular. I
No.
don't know if he was
It
like,
was Pasquale's pizza.
yeah, he was like, it's not regular pizza, it's not Little Caesars.
yeah.
Oh, it was good.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. So y'all, what's your first move?
Selecting a 4-person.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were kind of just like looking at each other, like, what do we do?
Yeah.
Like we listened to that 20 minutes of instructions the day before,
Yeah.
but like, really, what do you do? So someone just suggested, well, why don't we just go ahead and take a vote,
Mhm.
which we did. And
How'd you do that? Did you write it on paper and put it in
Nope.
a hat?
Nope, we were all honest and used our hands.
Wow.
And did you go 3, 2, 1?
We just all, yeah.
Mhm.
So it was like, all
But
right.
everyone was comfortable with each other
That's
and
nice.
sharing and talking, and it was great.
Yeah,
I mean,
no
It
judgments.
was great as it could be.
Yeah, everyone was like, okay, well.
Mhm.
So you take the vote. It's nearly unanimously guilty, but it's not unanimously guilty. We'll just say that. And
Right.
then what's next after that?
We started talking about the issues that we did have, went to the evidence list, pulled that out, and dove in.
Okay.
So once we tackled all of that, then we just pulled out all of the evidence and kind of divvied it up, and we're looking at it. And then we would have some side conversations, but then bring everybody back in when we found something interesting. And we were just, we were convinced.
Did you go through each? Because obviously, like, there's different points of proving first degree murder. I think like deliberate intent, like those kind of. Like, did you go through that kind of list of things to see if like?
Well, when we talked about the closing, because they talked about that in the closing and kind of already gave us, you know, those reasons, and we talked about those reasons. So
yeah,
and I think it was good. When we had an issue, you could pull out the evidence. It was right there, just like you're in school and you're trying to answer a question, you know?
Yeah, the way I felt, it couldn't be one. It couldn't be one or the other. If they, if he died of insulin shock, there's no way it could be anything other than first degree. Like, it's not involuntary. It's like she knows what she's doing.
Well,
so
basically, you did what we all would have wished we could have done, which was gather all the evidence and like sift.
And there was stuff I didn't see, and there's stuff I wish I would have, you know, but it was nerve-wracking. You're in there. We were sure, and why spend time like, you know, diving into it? I mean, it was a lot. It's, you know, it was just, we were ready.
How much versus like, so stuff we heard in court versus not, how much, how decisive were you from the court presented evidence, and then how much did the evidence not presented confirm it?
Well, it was pretty decisive even before we dove into the evidence. But the thing is, like, the things you saw, it was that over and over and over with, you know, multiple people. It's just, you know, it's repeated behaviors. There was something that stood out, and the day before, so February 5th, there was a confrontation between Natalie and Michael about some financial issues. Confrontation as in one-sided. So that was kind of
I think
alarming.
It was in the closing where he's asking about the Bank of America. Is that it? Or he's telling her,
was this about the...
There was some bills not being paid.
Oh, yeah.
So there were some bills not being paid that he did not know about, and he's confronting about it, and there's no response.
What specific bills? Do you remember?
It was a utility bill.
Okay.
That was being shut off.
Yeah. But I'm sure at that point, it's just kind of like he's adding up all of the different things.
Like, if we have millions of dollars, why is our utilities being shut off?
Yeah.
Okay. So like they were going to get the electric shut off or
something like that.
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly which one it was, but they were there shutting it off at the moment.
Oh, they were there.
They were there to shut it off, and they needed money to pay the delinquent bill. So
this was on February 5th.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I mean, stuff like that
kind of stood out to me. Like, I just feel like things were just, he was, you know, something was happening.
And that's two things. That proves that like maybe she snapped. That's what did it. And also proves he had no clue what was going on financially again, you know, even in their personal life.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's definitely. So, I guess, so ultimately, was it the evidence that made it completely unanimous? Like, did someone have a certain question that they could answer with evidence, or?
I think just after you seen repeated, you know, over and over and over, I mean, it was, you know, unanimous at the end. We're all like, yes. I mean, we all, I don't want to say felt good about it, because who feels good about something like this? But we all were sure about our decision.
So guilty verdicts in. Do you fill out paperwork after that? Like, what goes on?
There was one sheet of paperwork for the foreperson
to just submit that she was guilty to the judge.
That's it.
Okay. It seems like where did I hear that? I think I was watching the O.J. Simpson. They did like a narrative retelling of the O.J. Simpson trial, and they're like, to fill out the forms for guilty, it takes 3 hours. So I just assumed like
it was a single sheet.
Were there more charges for O.J. or was it just one?
Was the 2 murders, I think was it.
Because I mean, for them, it was what, guilty, not guilty on murder. And then if not guilty or not guilty on voluntary manslaughter.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And it may have been embellished for television. Who knows? That's probably what happened. But all right. So guilty's in. Are you nervous?
Absolutely. Every single one of us. When we walked out of the building that day, the police escorted us out.
Really?
And we were concerned.
Mm-hmm. Did you see the 2 bailiffs that had come in?
Yes.
Before the verdict?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I felt okay, but you never know. Emotions are high. And it was heavy.
Did people try to approach you at all after you left?
No. Honestly, I was surprised because we were expecting that. But at that point, we still had the mercy phase.
Yeah. So that's right too. And you still couldn't talk to each other past
which was
deliberation.
Crazy.
Right.
You know, we've already talked all day today and now we can't talk tomorrow, you know?
Yeah. And you can't talk to your family or anyone.
No.
Yeah. And the mercy phase arguably is the worst part of the whole freaking thing.
It was the worst part.
Yeah.
It was the worst day for sure.
Did you, because I remember thinking this day is going to be the worst, the mercy. Like, did you kind of know that they were going to pull on your heartstrings?
Oh yeah. That's what I said. Either it's just who's going to make me cry harder, the defense or the prosecution.
So they hand the paper to the judge. You get ready. Where are you looking? Are you looking at Natalie? Are you looking at?
I look straight forward. I just, I don't know.
Because she stood up, so you could have.
For one, it's hard to see, but I just didn't want to watch that.
Yeah,
Sure, it's hard.
Yeah,
I mean, it's hard. I mean, if you're human, it's not going to feel good. It's going to feel good that you're doing justice and you did your job, but it's like
it felt a little barbaric for me. You know, I just like this. All eyes are on this person, and I don't know. I just couldn't. I was just in my own head too. So we had just done a big thing.
Sure, yeah, and the kids are in there, so obviously,
yeah, I didn't want to see that.
Yeah. All right, so guilty's in. She receives the news. They sit down. They decide mercy phase is tomorrow, which
I didn't even realize this was going to happen until we were told. Like I was thinking, guilty, we're done. We're done.
Yeah. Do you remember?
Oh, hang on one second. Sorry. All right, go ahead.
Do you remember because I think you could have done that mercy phase that day. Would you, if you had been given a choice? I think it was Stanley who was like, "Oh, the kids aren't here," or he made excuses for why it couldn't happen. Would you have wanted it to happen that day, or were you?
I think they should have started. That would have helped because that last day was long, and not only was it long, it was just emotional. And by the time we got to deliberate, I mean, it was a long day.
Yeah.
So, how'd you sleep that night?
Not well at all. That was the worst day. And I mean, I knew what it was going to be emotional. So I was exhausted. Honestly, I'm still pretty tired.
Yeah. Oh, there's no doubt. Yeah. All right. So you drive to court. Did you have any preconceptions in mind of what you were going to do or what you needed to hear on either side?
I was thinking emotionally because I knew it was going to be playing on my emotions, and I was thinking mercy.
Really?
Yeah.
Were you hoping that there'd be some remorse shown or something like that?
Yes. Yeah, I don't think that day helped them.
And essentially, we'll kind of touch on it. That morning, what begins to happen is who was first? Let me walk through everybody. First was Penny. Yeah, Penny. Sister. And Penny gave a really good testimony. She didn't really throw shade on the Michael like would come later. And there's only one person that really, I think, heavily did it and probably decisively decided this. But I'm interested in your opinion. I'll leave that out But so Penny gets up and
I thought she did a good job. She was genuine.
Yeah.
Is she the first one to kind of throw shade at you guys, though, saying you have to live with this? This is, I
didn't feel that way yet.
I know later on it was very heavily brought up.
I felt like she wasn't claiming Natalie's innocence like others were.
Yeah.
I thought she was genuinely there to support her baby sister.
Sure, yeah. And you feel for her. It was
Right.
very emotional. So Sharon England gets up, and I call this, the Jesus defense it kind of felt, I'll let you speak on it before I, deter any thoughts.
Well, I thought she did a decent job until a point.
Right.
And then there was a point that I felt hardened. I was hardened.
Yeah. And the point was probably when she basically said, God's going to judge you
Yeah, that's it.
for this.
Yep.
I was surprised they let her, because that just seems like this is the jury that convicted Natalie. Like, that's already been decided. But like, to now like shame them, I feel like you want to do the opposite. Like, we appreciate you. We understand you had a difficult task. And like, we're asking you to do another difficult task. I feel like that would have been my strategy if I was trying to get the jury on my side after already convicting my client.
Yeah.
It felt like weaponizing religion, and it's just not okay with me.
It was a holy roller thing. It was like, I don't know.
Picking and choosing.
Yeah, exactly.
And no.
Right. Like, it's okay. Murder's okay. But if you don't give her mercy, then you're the bad person.
And honestly, at first that hit me and I'm like, oh man. But then I'm like, oh man,
Right.
And then Ashley Ager probably could feel the vibes in the room and got up and said, ma'am, you wear the 10 Commandments.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, does it not say thou shalt not kill?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, well, yeah, that's really all you got to say.
Yeah.
So
it was good.
yeah. All right. So then I don't really want to touch on the kids. Obviously, it's heartbreaking.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
The dad was very sad.
Sure.
And there's just a consistent theme of Natalie didn't do this.
Right.
Right. Stanley does. I think I don't know like what the conversations were beforehand, but Stanley does interject and say, she's already been convicted. We're not here to like rehash that. But they still were very adamant that she didn't do it, which again, if you're looking for
you don't care if Stanley says it.
No,
but
again,
he does say later, but the way he words it, he's wording it in a way
that she's guilty.
Right.
But
you want remorse.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You need to hear everyone get up and say, well, it's my opinion. What did you need to hear?
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's not what I needed to hear. It's what I don't know. Just pretending that, ignoring the fact that she was just found guilty, I think was the issue.
Sure. So, and that's kind of what I mentioned. I was like, if they get up there and say, we know our daughter did this, we love her, please.
Right.
I think it would have been done. I think it would have been no doubt. But then again, that's just, of course, I have no skin in the game at all.
It would have played a big impact.
Sure.
I think you can kind of argue, though, that kind of spoke to the level of deception that Natalie was able to weave, that even her own family, her own children, absolutely could not believe that she was involved in the Ponzi scheme or involved in the murder. And so I think that kind of speaks to that she's in prison now for the Ponzi scheme, and her own mother tried to say like, no, the charges have nothing to do with the Ponzi scheme.
Everything made sense to me at that moment.
Sure.
Every single person that was up there has been an enabler.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. 100%. And
it's sad. It's sad because they've been taken advantage of.
Yes. 100%.
And they can't acknowledge it, or they don't see it.
No.
And the whole meaning of mercy is to admit fault.
Right.
And that's the
I don't really like the wording. I feel like they should have just said, are you granting parole or not?
Mm-hmm.
The word mercy makes it feel different.
And on that too, how did they explain to you how many years would she have ultimately ended up doing for this murder?
So we did not know if it would be concurrent or consecutive. So it was 15 years. So if she's serving 11 years for this federal charge and she serves 15 for this murder charge, technically she could spend only 4 years for a murder.
But you all did not know that before.
We did not know that. And so, you don't know how Judge Kirkpatrick is going, to decide on that. So you can't let that, you have to think about it. She could spend 4 years for this murder.
Gotcha. So Larry gets up, her dad is very emotional, and then Daphne gets up, and to me, this is like, okay, well, I felt like, well, we just need to vote now because this is because she got up there and,
it was a lot of nonsense, not related to what needed to be discussed.
Yeah,
Sure.
she refused. She was kind of the first one to put it on Michael, I felt like, which was kind of really off-putting to say like, oh, well, Michael was into the drugs and,
When at one point she brought up Michael's family, and that was, I'm glad that she didn't go further.
Yeah.
Mentioned Donna selling the house.
Something
I don't remember exactly.
Right.
She said, I won't get into that.
Yeah.
That's what that was.
Mhm.
So yeah, there was a lot. And she mentioned, not only that, she was implying that Michael committed the financial crime by watching War Dogs, which I just was like, oh, because I've watched War Dogs.
I have too, but I need to rewatch it.
You need to rewatch it. So
See if it sparks any.
Right.
y'all, if y'all haven't watched War Dogs out there, so that's part of my completely, BS theory, but I think that's what sparked Natalie to do this whole thing. Is that movie. I think that there's a reason that movie was mentioned. But yeah, so she implies that he watched War Dogs and I told him, don't you do anything crazy? And he's like, I won't, And then she talks about, eventually he just blatantly asks, like, did she commit the financial crime? No.
Mm-hmm.
Did she commit the murder?
And I know I immediately looked to Truman when she said that.
Yeah, he didn't. I don't think there was a single objection for any of them from the defense or from the prosecution for the defense's witnesses.
I think they knew. They was like, I don't have to do anything. Like,
Well, it's clear this woman is struggling,
sure.
With the truth, unfortunately.
with a lot. Yes.
Yeah, it's very sad. And like you mentioned,
It didn't help. It didn't
Mhm.
help.
No, and enabling is real. You mentioned enabling. I mean, yeah. That's what's going on. But
I can't imagine being in her situation. So
no. I mean, it would be horrible.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be horrible. But at the same time,
you have to accept reality.
exactly when
There are consequences for actions.
when there are mountains of evidence, you at the very least don't victim blame
Correct.
out of respect. So, but yeah.
This is desperation.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And everyone, I think everyone felt that way. But then, the daughter got up very, very sad. And we get into lunch. The daughter and son both get up.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get into lunch and it's prosecution's turn and they call Stephanie Hamilton. They basically reaffirm like all of Michael's friends.
Yeah. Well, they get the chance to finally say what because before it was, show me the text messages, tell me what happened. And now it's like, how did all of this make you feel?
Right.
Sure.
And I think immediately, like Stephanie gets up and it's like objection. And you kind of get a sense of what's going to happen for the remainder of this mercy phase is that Matthew's going to continually object.
I
to
felt like the
everything.
prosecution was very respectful during the defense's, turn. And it wasn't, the other way around.
Yeah.
Wasn't reciprocated.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I think ultimately hurt. I mean, I think in this phase, you let people talk. But again, I'm not a lawyer, but yeah. So Stephanie and John get up and then we have.
You let victims talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
And they're all victims.
The victims got objected throughout the whole thing.
It really I feel like it made it even more emotional to have someone start explaining what was happening and then stop. And it was very like jarring that like back, like that stopping and starting that back and forth. I felt like they should have just
Like, we're almost finished. Just let them speak.
right. And again, like she's guilty.
Right.
We know that. Like,
That's a good point. Like, we're like, come on, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, they carried it to the end.
They did.
To their credit.
I'd say the judge also considered that when letting the prosecution's witnesses speak is that the defense was allowed their time. The people who supported Natalie were given the chance to say how they feel, to express their love for Natalie, and they were not, there was no interjection. They weren't halted. They weren't stopped. They were given their
I feel like she was
time.
given the best chance
Yeah.
she had.
Mm-hmm. And the the prosecution, they just weren't given that same amount of respect and time.
Mhm.
And again, it's probably their strategy to kind of, not let
It's desperation.
And
it was
sad.
unfortunate. Yeah.
It's sad for everyone else
Mhm.
except for their family.
Yeah.
And Chris is up here, obviously emotional. He was a wreck during
Mhm.
this. And everyone was just a wreck with him.
Yeah.
Is there any moment of this day where you just found tears just
Oh, definitely during Chris Davis.
Mhm.
I was numb to a point, especially when, multiple people earlier in the day have kind of guilted the jury.
Yeah.
But that one, it hit me. You could see this grown man up there, very emotional. That's honesty right there.
yeah.
And previously you didn't know who was who. You didn't know who
No.
the family was. But at this point, you know who everyone is.
Mhm.
Did it stick out to you that the bench behind her was completely empty? There was no family?
we discussed that
Mhm.
during deliberations. And his side was packed.
Right. And it was full. They weren't all there for the defense,
Mhm.
but they
Which is
were,
understandable, but they were waiting
yeah.
for the answer.
But Michael's parents were definitely there for both.
They
And it
were
was-
there, yes.
Mhm.
Michael's parents were there. Like I said, I thought they were there the whole time.
Mhm.
Just maybe not that for this first couple days, but
Yeah.
they were there.
Yeah. I think it was day 3 when Donna officially,
2 or 3. Yeah.
2 or 3. So yeah, Chris gets up. Everyone's a wreck. Even the clerk. I'm watching her wipe her eyes.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And Tony McCall got up, and her point was she was a victim of the scholarships,
Mm-hmm.
which was,
I think she actually shows up in the sentencing for Natalie. I think she was also a victim in the Ponzi scheme.
And she was also a vulnerable person
Parent, yes.
because she had lost her husband.
Mm-hmm.
So again here,
And then
looking at someone's vulnerabilities, and
You're told your son gets a full ride and it's yanked away.
yeah.
not only that, like it's too late to get other funding, other scholarships. Like
Mhm.
it's too late.
So they're essentially, they got to wait. They're getting a late start.
Possibly.
Yeah. Or
well,
the mom has to take out loans, or, it's a,
I'm sure it was a mess.
Yeah. Yeah. So that one was bad. And then we get to Ed Bolt. And man, when the defense crossed him, he just gives this emotion. He's reading his letter and he's constantly objected throughout it, just trying to relay. And there may have been just one part where it was relevant to object. And
I was getting squirmy.
he's like,
yeah.
yeah.
I understood the anger, but
Yeah.
Totally
yeah.
get it, but it needed to be stopped.
yeah.
Sure. And that's good to get your thoughts on that, because I felt the same way. I was watching it live and I was like, he did so great. And then
And he's like, okay. When they told him to stop.
Yeah.
he's like, all right, yeah, well, I tried.
Yeah.
But I want to know what those shoes had relevance to, because he was going to say, Michael bought me these shoes, and he started to tell a story, and then they didn't allow him to, but how did that affect you before we give our opinion? How'd that affect you, them saying he'd only come around during the holidays? Isn't that
Well,
true?
I think that's because he was led that life. I think that she pulled him that way. I think I know some people that have done similar things. You know what I mean? It's I don't know.
I think it's pretty.
I felt sorry for her.
Sure. I think it's pretty normal that, like, most people just see their family let's be honest. Most people see their family on the holidays.
Mhm.
A lot of people, some people are closer than others, but typically on the male side too,
Mhm.
that side of the family.
You lean more toward
Mhm.
to the wife's family.
Exactly.
That's true.
Exactly. And then when you have someone who's over, like,
I didn't
manipulative,
take anything away from that. I didn't take
Mhm.
away that they had a bad relationship. They didn't convince me of that at all. I just thought that, yeah, you're busy, you have
Mhm.
children, life goes on, and also getting pulled. And it was clear that they were very involved with Natalie's family.
Mhm.
Sure. And it was like, this stuff was being fed from Natalie. So I just thought it was a bad look for her. Like, this is what you're going to say? Like, this is your thing? Like, oh, y'all weren't close anyway. Like, what's that gonna?
Like, well, they lived with them at one point. She babysat their like children. It was
Right.
just they were very involved. So
They gave him $250,000.
Yeah. And also too, like I think they lost sight of the point of the day. The point of the day was to determine whether or not you guys thought that Natalie should get the chance of parole. And whether or not the family was particularly close, I don't think really played into whether or not she deserved mercy.
right. Well, you can be close with one family and not close with the other, and still have no bad feelings. It's
Right.
just-
Yeah. I think that's normal. I mean, let us know out there in the comments, but to me, that's normal, and it fell flat with me. And two, saying how many people you're not close with, you're going to give $250,000. Give me a break. And then we get to Mama Bear of the USA, Donna Bolt. So they start off with the objections. We kind of touched on this earlier, and we understood why Judge Kirk had to do it. They weren't administered into evidence, but still, it has to affect you coming in. What were you looking forward to hearing
I was
her?
absolutely looking forward to it. We had heard her sobs, throughout the trial. And I think she deserved, her time to speak. I think, I'm not just talking about her, but the whole thing I feel like could have been set up a little bit better. Maybe if everybody read a letter and then they asked questions or something to guide them a little bit. Or if she would have just been able to have the time to read her 8-page letter and then ask a couple questions. I think that would have been more helpful, but I think she deserved the right to share.
Well, she just came off and she was like, I've been bottling this in for 6 years and y'all are going to hear what I got to say. And still they are objecting.
Yeah. I think we could tell at that point that it was coming.
Oh, yeah.
And, she was looking her in the eye.
I know. Yeah. A lot. Did you notice that there were several times that she addressed Natalie directly? They had to stop it because you're not supposed to do that. But
yeah, she did.
Yeah. She's looking right at her.
Dropped the mic on Victor too. It's like, ma'am, you have no clue how their relationship or what was said in those text messages. I think so was. And she was like, you don't either. And she's like, I'm sorry. Right after that, I was like, golly, man. I mean, but like you mentioned, you're witnessing truth. Like, yeah, she said this really cringy thing about pinching his freaking balls in the hospital. Yeah. She was led to the wrong hospital. Yeah. She didn't get a call till that evening. I mean, I just felt like you're hearing the truth the whole time.
There are a lot of red flags.
Yeah.
It's true.
And she wasn't able to invite people to the freaking funeral. This guy who had so many friends. I mean, I heard that from so many people that weren't allowed to attend. People that testified in this weren't allowed to attend. So obviously, did it kind of reaffirm what you were going to say at this point? Or
yeah, and we hadn't heard this side of the story at all. We hadn't heard anything from her. So, I mean, it was important.
Yeah. Yeah. So then we go into Robert Heinzman, which was basically where I think, was that Betsy Britland? I think she was brought up there. I can't remember, but
Potentially.
They brought him up. What was the specific reason for the mercy phase?
It was to determine whether or not Natalie could, like, whether or not the jury could be swayed into giving her mercy or not. And I think Heinzman was just there to, again, reaffirm Natalie's guilt in the Ponzi scheme, and also just kind of provide some context because Natalie did not speak. So just kind of, I think, provide some clarity as to who Natalie was and whether or not her actions were worthy of mercy.
And I think that it continued after his death.
Yes, that too. That was definitely brought up, that like she kept up the scheme. Donna got messages. I think Chris got messages. Stephanie got messages.
Because Stephanie didn't even invest until right before this.
Yeah. So again, it was just to show, like, if there's remorse,
while he's laying dying in the hospital, she said she got.
Well, they
text.
didn't have any money.
Yeah,
she was.
She needed it.
Right.
She needed money.
Yeah.
So that would make sense why she would do it. But again, it goes to her character overall. I think.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Crazy. All right. So Robert Heinzman done, and then they go into closing arguments. So Stanley, my boy Stanley, gave it a shot. He's up first. Are you kind of listening at this point, or are you like, could you please wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, we were ready.
How do you feel about your tax dollars going?
That definitely rubbed me the wrong way because really, I mean, you could pull out the death penalty there if you really want to argue what's going to cost less money. Not that I believe that in that, but
Sure. Well, and it's not in West Virginia, but I mean, arguably in some states it could have been tried as that.
But again, like it's like he's trying to guilt you into giving her mercy. Like,
well, it's like, what is it worth to keep her behind bars? And I'll tell you, it's priceless.
Yeah. Good answer, because it became clear, especially, Heinzman, I think your point too was like, if you let her out, she's going to hurt people either financially or otherwise.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So yeah.
That was part of our discussion during the mercy phase. It's once a narcissist, always a narcissist. And, the part of parole is that the criminals can be rehabilitated in prison and released into society as a functioning member. And we didn't believe that would happen.
Sure.
Well, she proved that to you, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Repeatedly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so yeah, he gives, I don't know, all kinds of things. And the additional one that wasn't gave in their morning mercy defense, the defense's mercy phase was the tax dollars. It costs a lot of money to keep her in prison. You want to let her work. You want to let her pay taxes. First off, she didn't pay taxes. Second, no. So anyway, they give their clothes, and then the prosecution, their clothes was really short. Ashley was like, the prosecution's way, it was like, listen, even with the witnesses, they said, we're not going to tell y'all what to pick because you 12 have the decision. You know what you know. We're good with whatever you choose. And the defense was opposite. It was like, you're going to be judged. You better watch.
Right.
So I think Ashley knew that, and that's why she was so short. She was like, yeah, whatever. So now we close and y'all go back. How did that go? What's the first conversation?
It wasn't near as close as the verdict. That was heavy, and I think just the word mercy bothers me too. It's just like they're sitting out here begging us all day long. It was very emotional. By that point, it was just heavy. But we needed to take the emotion out of it and look at the facts. And like I said a minute ago, parole was intended, to be rehabilitated and released. And that was not going to happen here. And then again, thinking about the terms, is 4 years enough for murdering a spouse? We weren't okay with that.
Potentially 4 years at that time.
And we didn't know how he would. So you can't say, oh, well, let's hope that he chooses this. You can't do that. You have to stick with the facts that you're given. And I just think she would repeat it.
Yep.
Also, how many people is it going to affect if she stays in prison directly? And how many people is this going to affect if she gets out in 4 years? And when she gets out, okay, let's say she gets 15 years and she gets out, who's going to be taking care of her? The kids that have already been burdened with enough?
Yeah.
That's a really good thought process, I think.
Yeah, you got to think about everything. And I think, what you meant, a narcissist will remain a narcissist. And you're essentially, to me, it would become like, well, if I let her out, I'm kind of like, I don't want to be liable for what this lady does.
Right.
So it was more decisive of a decision, or it was harder to
It was harder.
Harder. Okay.
It was until because we were talking on emotion. Once we took emotion out of it, that helped.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, emotionally, obviously, you want the kids, you want kids to be happy.
Sure.
But at the same time,
what was best for them? Is it best for them? that she gets out.
Right.
I mean, yeah,
It's hard to, yeah.
I think their grandparents are probably good grandparents, but
We said they are being taken care of right now. They are loved, period. That's clear. Also, they're almost adults. They're not 10 years old.
yep, yeah, yeah, and when you have going back to the defense's process of the mercy phase, when you have people who are obviously actively enabling, you're just, you're saying like, oh, I can't put her back in this. She's not going to have a way to get healthy in this environment.
Right.
So yeah. Well, all right. So you decide, and then do you fill out a paper same way?
Yep. One paper,
and you go out, and this is, kind of over, but not really, because then you're going to be hit with the media onslaught after it's done. But are you kind of glad it's over? Are you sad? What's the emotion?
I was just exhausted. I was relieved. Numb. Well, one of my friends asked me how I was doing, and I just said, I don't know what to say. I didn't know what to say. It's just a lot.
Yeah.
So.
When you do finally get released from the judge to like go about your normal life now, like, what do you like? I don't know. Like, I'm just.
Well, that night, I mean, we left pretty quickly, after we were dismissed from the courtroom, and we all walked out together. We waited till everyone was ready. We all walked out together. We were handed letters from ABC News, but that was it. I was expecting to be hounded, but it wasn't like that. We walked to our cars, and it was fine. Then, that's when I heard from people. People were very respectful and left me alone. But, then.
And they kind of catch wind in your world of people.
My
they
immediate
catch wind.
people.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, they know I'm not doing my everyday life, Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. All right. And you decided to come here. Why?
Well, I knew there would be judgment one way or another, and I just really wanted people to know about that amazing jury. I mean, we took it very seriously. We worked together, and they're just a wonderful group of people. And, I won't say it's a good experience, but it was people from all over the county, all different walks of life, from, 20 to almost 70, people we would never interact with before. And we enjoyed each other's company at times, and people that I'm connected with for probably a while. And it's a pretty neat thing to see people come together that are strangers and work together and look at the evidence and make a choice.
So y'all collaborated really well. There wasn't no arguing.
Nothing. Everybody listened to one another, and, I just can't say enough good things.
Have you leaned on each other since then, knowing that it was such a heavy burden, it was such a long time commitment, and trying to process? Have you guys talked about what that's felt like?
Not necessarily that. We have reached out and shared a few things, shared an article or the Fingergate thing. I've talked to a few of them about. I wasn't offended. It wasn't professional, but I wasn't offended. But so we've shared some things about that, and I know a few people have said the more time passes, the more things you see, the more at peace we're at. So
right. Well, amazing job. How quickly was the media overwhelming when you started? Like, oh my goodness, this is a lot.
Well, I did go down a rabbit hole and get sucked in. And I listened to all your podcasts, and I didn't know the background knowledge. So that part was interesting to me. And then it again made me feel better about things the more I heard. And I need to take a step back. But, it consumed my life for 3 weeks, day in, day out, stuck in my head, not talking to anybody. So then when you finally get the chance, you don't even know what to do.
Yeah. And you mentioned about the system working. I think that's what everyone felt, because I don't know if you had this experience, but after you were done, listening to things, I think majority of us picked up the same things.
Mhm.
So I feel like the system really came through and said, here are the facts. Here's everything relative that you need to know. And not only that, here's all the evidence we didn't have time to cover, which I didn't know about a lot of it. And I just feel like it worked. It just worked.
Mhm.
It made me proud for sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it worked. And, there's a lot of circumstantial stuff, but, to me, there was more than that with the glucose readings and all of these things, these text messages of blatant lies and people getting twisted up. It was just evident. Do you think you'll have which I hope not, do you think you'll get PTSD from this, or is it kind of
No.
like...
I mean, this is definitely something I'm going to think about a lot, especially today. Today's February 6th and the 11th. I think those days will stick with me forever. And I'll think about Michael Cochran.
Yeah.
Yep. And on that, are you aware with kind of what we're trying to do with the Michael Brandon Cochran law?
Yes, a little bit.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So basically what it is, it's a test that it may have been the test they were going to try and do. I think I don't know this for sure, but it feels like that could have been, but it's a C-peptide test, and it tests the amount of insulin levels in a body. And if they gave that to him, I'm fully confident that she would have been charged in 2019. And also, I think it would have saved a lot of the smoke being thrown around. So we're trying to get legislation passed that requires medical facilities in West Virginia in a suspicious death or someone who is in ICU for suspicious reasons to have this test.
Well, they mentioned multiple times that they don't study this. This isn't something that's ever studied.
Mhm.
So if that's the case, if there's something we can do to prevent it, then, that's what we need to be doing.
Yeah. Which, obviously it can't do anything but help, but I think
Right.
it would have been case closed. Case closed. Long time ago. You better take a plea deal because...
If we can bring good out of this situation, I think it's great.
Yeah. Well, we are trying. Anything else before you close the book on this? I think y'all mentioned y'all ain't going to do many interviews, if any at all, or...
Yeah, not interested.
Yeah. Kind of done.
Not interested in the attention. I just want everybody to know it was a special group of people that got together and did this. And it was a lot. And we leaned on each other. And I think that, we're happy with, not happy, we're at peace with everything.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming in. Thank you, Josie, for joining us. And thank you, everybody, for watching this emotional episode. It's very important that we know about this now. So very grateful for you to coming out. And, the other 11, wherever you are, thank you for everything that you have did. You all sacrificed a lot to do this. Everyone else, please subscribe to Creepalachia on YouTube. Like this video. We have a podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify. Be sure to leave a review on your listening experience. And we are on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram as well. And until then, rest in peace, Michael Brandon Cochran. For everybody, Donna said it's Michael Brandon Cochran, so you know. But rest in peace. Thoughts to the family and also Natalie's side. Our thoughts go out to you. I hope this can start some healing for everyone in some way. And also, before I forget, y'all always remember, long live Appalachia.